He looked carefully and suspiciously at the unexpected visitor. Svidrigailov. But what nonsense! If Timpy, he said at last, aloud in bewilderment. His visitor did not seem at all surprised at this exclamation. I've come to you for two reasons. What then? In the first place, I wanted to make a personal acquaintance, as I have already heard a great deal about you that is interesting and flattering. Secondly, I cherish the hope that you may not refuse to assist me in a matter directly concerning the welfare of your sister Avdatia Romanovna. For without your support she might not let me come near her now, for she is prejudiced against me. But with your assistance I reckon on. You reckon wrongly, interrupted Raskolnikov. They only arrived yesterday, may I ask you? Raskolnikov made no reply. It was yesterday, I know. I only arrived myself the day before. Well, let me tell you this, Rodion Romanovich. I don't consider it necessary to justify myself, but kindly tell me what was there particularly criminal on my part in all this business, speaking without prejudice, with common sense. Raskolnikov continued to look at him in silence. That in my own house I persecuted the defenseless girl and insulted her with my infamous proposals. Is that it? I'm anticipating you, but you wanted to assume that I too am a man, et neu human et male human. In a word, that I am capable of being attracted and falling in love, which does not depend on our will. Then everything can be explained in the most natural manner. The question is, am I a monster, or am I myself a victim? And what if I am a victim? In proposing to the object of my passion to elope with me to America or Switzerland, I may have cherished the deepest respect for her, and may have thought that I was promoting our mutual happiness. Reason is the slave of passion, you know. Why, probably I was doing more harm to myself than anyone, but that's not the point, Raskolnikov interrupted with disgust. It's simply that whether you are right or wrong, we dislike you. We don't want to have anything to do with you. We show you the door. Go out, Svidrigailov broke into a sudden laugh. But there is no getting round you, he said, laughing in the frankest way. I hoped to get round you, but you took up the right line at once. But you are trying to get round me still. What of it? What of it? Cried Svidrigailov, laughing openly. But this is what the French call bon guerre, and the most innocent form of deception. But still, you have interrupted me. One way or another, I repeat again, there would never have been any unpleasantness except for what happened in the garden. Marfa Petrovna. You have got rid of Marfa Petrovna too, so they say. Raskolnikov interrupted rudely. Huh. Oh, you've heard that too, then. You'd be sure to, though. But as for your question, I really don't know what to say, though my own conscience is quite at rest on that score. Don't suppose that I am in any apprehension about it. All was regular and in order. The medical inquiry diagnosed apoplexy due to bathing immediately after a heavy dinner and a bottle of wine, and indeed, it could have proved nothing else. But I'll tell you what I have been thinking to myself of late, on my way here in the train especially. Didn't I contribute to all that? Calamity, morally, in a way, by irritation or something of the sort. But I came to the conclusion that that, too, was quite out of the question. Raskolnikov laughed. I wonder you trouble yourself about it. But what are you laughing at? Only consider I struck her just twice with a switch. There were no marks even. Don't regard me as a cynic, please. I'm perfectly aware how atrocious it was of me and all that, but I know for certain too that Marfa Petrovna was very likely pleased at my, so to say, warmth. Nah. The story of your sister had been wrung out to the last drop. For the last 3 days, Marfa Petrovna had been forced to sit at home. She had nothing to show herself with in the town. Besides, she had bored them so with that letter. You heard about her reading a letter. And all of a sudden, those two switches fell from heaven. Her first act was to order the carriage to be got out. Not to speak of the fact that there are cases when women are very, very glad to be insulted in spite of all their show of indignation. There are instances of it with everyone. Human beings in general, indeed, greatly love to be insulted. Have you noticed that? But it's particularly so with women. One might even say it's their only amusement. At one time, Raskolnikov thought of getting up and walking out and so finishing the interview. But some curiosity and even a sort of prudence made him linger for a moment. "You are fond of fighting?" he asked carelessly. "No, not very," Svidrigailov answered calmly, and Marfa Petrovna and I scarcely ever fought. We lived very harmoniously and she was always pleased with me. I only used the whip twice in all our 7 years, not counting a third occasion of a very ambiguous character. The first time, 2 months after our marriage, immediately after we arrived in the country, and the last time was that of which we are speaking. Did you suppose I was such a monster, such a reactionary, such a slave driver? Ha, ha! By the way, do you remember Rodion Romanovich, how a few years ago, in those days of beneficent publicity, a nobleman, I've forgotten his name, was put to shame everywhere, in all the papers, for having thrashed a German woman in the railway train. You remember? Gee. It was in those days, that very year, I believe, the disgraceful action of the age took place. You know, the Egyptian Nights, that public reading, you remember? The dark eyes, you know. Ah, the golden days of our youth, where are they? Well, as for the gentleman who thrashed the German, I feel no sympathy with him. Because after all, what need is there for sympathy? But I must say that there are sometimes such provoking Germans that I don't believe there is a progressive who could quite answer for himself. No one looked at the subject from that point of view then, but that's the truly humane point of view, I assure you. After saying this, Svidrigailov broke into a sudden laugh again. Raskolnikov saw clearly that this was a man with a firm purpose in his mind, unable to keep it to himself. "I expect you have not talked to anyone for some days?" he asked. "Huh, scarcely anyone. I suppose you are wondering at my being such an adaptable man?" "No, I am only wondering at your being too adaptable a man, because I am not offended at the rudeness of your questions." Is that it? But why take offense? As you asked, so I answered, he replied with a surprising expression of simplicity. "You know, there's hardly anything I take interest in," he went on, as it were dreamily. "Especially now I have nothing to do. You are quite at liberty to imagine, though, that I am making up to you with a motive, particularly as I told you I want to see your sister about something. But I'll confess frankly I am very much bored. The last 3 days especially, so I'm delighted to see you. Don't be angry, Rodion Romanovich, but you seem to be somehow awfully strange yourself. Say what you like, there's something wrong with you, and now too, not this very minute, I mean, but now, generally. Well, I won't, don't scowl. I'm not such a bearer, you know, as you think." Raskolnikov looked gloomily at him. "You are not a bear, perhaps, at all," he said. "I fancy, indeed, that you are a man of very good breeding, or at least know how on occasion to behave like one." "I am not particularly interested in anyone's opinions," Fyodor answered dryly, and even with a shade of haughtiness. "And therefore why not be vulgar at times when vulgarity is such a convenient cloak for our climate? And especially if one has a natural propensity that way," he added, laughing again. "But I've heard you have many friends here. You are, as they say, not without connections. What can you want with me, then, unless you've some special object?" "That's true that I have friends here," Svidrigailov admitted, not replying to the chief point. "I've met some already. I've been lounging about for the last 3 days, and I've seen them, or they've seen me. That's a matter of course. I am well dressed and reckon not a poor man. The emancipation of the serfs hasn't affected me. My property consists chiefly of forests and water meadows. The revenue has not fallen off, but I am not going to see them. I was sick of them long ago. I've been here 3 days and I've called on no one. What a town it is. How has it come into existence among us? Tell me that. A town of officials and students of all sorts. Yes, there's a great deal I didn't notice when I was here 8 years ago, kicking up my heels. My only hope now is in anatomy. By Jove, it is anatomy. But as for these clubs, Dussaults, parades, or progress indeed, maybe. Well, all that can go on without me, he went on, again without noticing the question. Besides, who wants to be a card sharper? Why have you been a card sharper then? How could I help being? Huh. There was a regular set of us, men of the best society, 8 years ago. We had a fine time. And all men of breeding, you know, poets, men of property. And indeed, as a rule in our Russian society, the best manners are found among those who've been thrashed. Have you noticed that? I've deteriorated in the country. But I did get into prison for debt through a low Greek who came from Nijin. Then Marfa Petrovna turned up. She bargained with him and bought me off for 30,000 silver pieces. I owed 70,000. We were united in lawful wedlock and she bore me off into the country like a treasure. You know she was 5 years older than I. She was very fond of me. For 7 years I never left the country. And, take note, that all my life she held a document over me, the IOU for 30,000 rubles, so if I were to elect to be restive about anything I should be trapped at once, and she would have done it. Women find nothing incompatible in that. If it hadn't been for that, would you have given her the slip? I don't know what to say. It was scarcely the document restrained me. I didn't want to go anywhere else. Marfa Petrovna herself invited me to go abroad, seeing I was bored, but I've been abroad before, and always felt sick there, for no reason but the sunrise, the Bay of Naples, the sea you look at them, and it makes you sad. What's most revolting is that one is really sad. No, it's better at home. Here at least one blames others for everything, and excuses oneself. I should have gone perhaps on an expedition to the North Pole, because Jay, Levin, mothers, and hate drinking, and there's nothing left but wine. I have tried it. But I say, I've been told Berg is going up in a great balloon next Sunday from the Yusupol Garden and will take up passengers at a fee. Is it true? Why, would you go up? No, oh no, muttered Svidrigailov, really seeming to be deep in thought. What does he mean? Is he in earnest? Raskolnikov wondered. No, the document didn't restrain me, Svidrigailov went on meditatively. It was my own doing, not leaving the country. And merely a year ago, Marfa Petrovna gave me back the document on my name day, and made me a present of a considerable sum of money, too. She had a fortune, you know. You see how I trust you, Arkady Ivanovich. That was actually her expression. You don't believe she used it? But do you know I manage the estate quite decently? They know me in the neighborhood. I ordered books, too. Marfa Petrovna at first approved, but afterwards she was afraid of my overstudying. You seem to be missing Marfa Petrovna very much. Missing her? Perhaps. Ah, really, perhaps I am. And, by the way, do you believe in ghosts? What ghosts? Why, ordinary ghosts. Do you believe in them? Perhaps not. Poor Vupler. I wouldn't say no exactly. Do you see them then? Svidrigailov looked at him rather oddly. Marfa Petrovna is pleased to visit me, he said, twisting his mouth into a strange smile. How do you mean, she is pleased to visit you? She has been 3 times. I saw her first on the very day of the funeral, an hour after she was buried. It was the day before I left to come here. The second time was the day before yesterday, at daybreak, on the journey at the station of Malaya Brishera, and the third time was 2 hours ago in the room where I am staying. I was alone. Were you awake? Quite awake. I was wide awake every time. She comes, speaks to me for a minute, and goes out at the door, always at the door. I can almost hear her. What made me think that something of the sort must be happening to you? Raskolnikov said suddenly. At the same moment he was surprised at having said it. He was much excited. What? Oh, did you think so? Svidrigailov asked in astonishment. Did you really? Didn't I say that there was something in common between us, eh? And X919. You never said so. Raskolnikov cried sharply and with heat. Didn't I? No, I thought I did. When I came in and saw you lying with your eyes shut, pretending, I said to myself at once, here's the man. What do you mean by the man? What are you talking about? Cried Raskolnikov. What do I mean? I really don't know. Svidrigailov muttered ingenuously, as though he, too, were puzzled. For a minute they were silent. They stared in each other's faces. That's all nonsense, Raskolnikov shouted with vexation. What does she say when she comes to you? She. Would you believe it? She talks of the silliest trifles, and man is a strange creature. It makes me angry. The first time she came in, I was tired and all. The funeral service, the funeral ceremony, the lunch afterwards. At last I was left alone in my study. I lighted a cigar and began to think. She came in at the door. You've been so busy today, Arkady Ivanovich. You have forgotten to wind the dining room clock, she said. All those 7 years I've wound that clock every week, and if I forgot it, she would always remind me. The next day, I set off on my way here. I got out at the station at daybreak. I'd been asleep, tired out, with my eyes half open. I was drinking some coffee. I looked up and there was suddenly Marfa Petrovna sitting beside me with a pack of cards in her hands. Shall I tell your fortune for the journey, Arkady Ivanovich? She was a great hand at telling fortunes. I shall never forgive myself for not asking her to. I ran away in a fright and, besides, the bell rang. I was sitting today, feeling very heavy after a miserable dinner from a cook shop. I was sitting smoking. All of a sudden Marfa Petrovna again. She came in very smart in a new green silk dress with a long train. Good day, Arkady Ivanovich. How do you like my dress? Aniska can't make like this. Aniska was a dressmaker in the country, one of our former serf girls who had been trained in Moscow. A pretty wench. She stood turning round before me. I looked at the dress, and then I looked carefully, very carefully, at her face. I wonder you trouble to come to me about such trifles, Marfa Petrovna. Good gracious, you won't let one disturb you about anything. To tease her, I said, I want to get married, Marfa Petrovna. That's just like you, Arkady Ivanovich. It does you very little credit to come looking for a bride when you've hardly buried your wife. And if you could make a good choice at least, but I know it won't be for your happiness or hers. You will only be a laughing stock to all good people. Then she went out and our train seemed to rustle. Isn't it nonsense, eh? But perhaps you are telling lies, Raskolnikov put in. I rarely lie, answered Svidrigailov thoughtfully, apparently not noticing the rudeness of the question. And in the past, have you ever seen ghosts before? Yes, I have seen them, but only once in my life, 6 years ago. I had a serf, Filka. Just after his burial, I called out, forgetting, Filka, my pipe. He came in and went to the cupboard where my pipes were. I sat still and thought, he is doing it out of revenge, because we had a violent quarrel just before his death. How dare you come in with a hole in your elbow, I said. Go away, you scamp. He turned and went out and never came again. I didn't tell Marfa Petrovna at the time. I wanted to have a service sung for him, but I was ashamed. You should go to a doctor. I know I am not well without your telling me, though I don't know what's wrong. I believe I am 5 times as strong as you are. I didn't ask you whether you believe that ghosts are seen. but whether you believe that they exist. No, I won't believe it. Raskolnikov cried with positive anger. What do people generally say? Muttered Svidrigailov, as though speaking to himself, looking aside and bowing his head. They say you are ill, so what appears to you is only unreal fantasy. But that's not strictly logical. I agree that ghosts only appear to the sick, but that only proves that they are unable to appear except to the sick, not that they don't exist. Nothing of the sort, Raskolnikov insisted irritably. No? You don't think so? Svidrigailov went on, looking at him deliberately. But what do you say to this argument? Help me with it. Ghosts are, as it were, shreds and fragments of other worlds, the beginning of them. A man in health has of course no reason to see them, because he is above all a man of this earth and is bound for the sake of completeness and order to live only in this life. But as soon as one is ill, as soon as the normal earthly order of the organism is broken, one begins to realize the possibility of another world, and the more seriously ill one is, the closer becomes one's contact with that other world, so that as soon as the man dies, he steps straight into that world. I thought of that long ago. If you believe in a future life, you could believe in that too. I don't believe in a future life, said Raskolnikov. Svidrigailov sat lost in thought. And what if there are only spiders there or something of that sort? He said suddenly. He is a madman, thought Raskolnikov. We always imagine eternity as something beyond our conception, something vast, but why must it be vast? Instead of all that, what if it's one little room, like a bathhouse in the country, black and grimy and spiders in every corner, and that's all eternity is? I sometimes fancy it like that. Can it be you can imagine nothing juster and more comforting than that? Raskolnikov cried, with a feeling of anguish. Ha ha ha, Trista. And how can we tell? Perhaps that is just. And do you know it's what I would certainly have made it, answered Svidrigailov with a vague smile. This horrible answer sent a cold chill through Raskolnikov. Svidrigailov raised his head, looked at him, and suddenly began laughing. Only think, he cried. Half an hour ago we had never seen each other. We regarded each other as enemies. There is a matter unsettled between us. We've thrown it aside, and away we've gone into the abstract. Wasn't I right in saying that we were birds of a feather? Kindly allow me, Raskolnikov went on irritably, to ask you to explain why you have honored me with your visit, and I am in a hurry. I have no time to waste. I want to go out. By all means, by all means. Your sister, Avdatia Romanovna, is going to be married to Mr. Luzhin Pyotr Petrovich. Can you refrain from any question about my sister and from mentioning her name? I can't understand how you dare utter her name in my presence, if you really are Svidrigailov. Why? But I've come here to speak about her. How can I avoid mentioning her? Very good, speak, but make haste. I am sure that you must have formed your own opinion of this Mr. Luzhin, who is a connection of mine through my wife, if you have only seen him for half an hour or heard any facts about him. He is no match for Avdotia Romanovna. I believe Avdotia Romanovna is sacrificing herself generously and prudently for the sake of her family. I fancied from all I had heard of you that you would be very glad if the match could be broken off without the sacrifice of worldly advantages. Now I know you personally. I am convinced of it. All this is very naive. Excuse me, I should have said impudent on your part, said Raskolnikov. You mean to say that I am seeking my own ends? Don't be uneasy, Rodion Romanovich. If I were working for my own advantage, I would not have spoken out so directly. I am not quite a fool. I will confess something psychologically curious about that. Just now, defending my love for Avdotia Romanovna, I said I was myself the victim. Well, let me tell you that I've no feeling of love now, not the slightest. So that I wonder myself indeed, for I really did feel something, through idleness and depravity, Raskolnikov put in. I certainly am idle and depraved, but your sister has such qualities that even I could not help being impressed by them. But that's all nonsense, as I see myself now. Have you seen that long? I began to be aware of it before, but was only perfectly sure of it the day before yesterday, almost at the moment I arrived in Petersburg. I still fancied in Moscow, Al, that I was coming to try to get Avdotya Romanovna's hand and to cut out Mr. Luzhin. Excuse me for interrupting you. Kindly be brief and come to the object of your visit. I am in a hurry. I want to go out with the greatest pleasure. On arriving here and determining on a certain journey, I should like to make some necessary preliminary arrangements. I left my children with an aunt. They are well provided for, and they have no need of me personally, and a nice father I should make too. I have taken nothing but what Marfa Petrovna gave me a year ago. That's enough for me. Excuse me, I'm just coming to the point. Before the journey which may come off, I want to settle Mr. Pound. Luzhin, too. It's not that I detest him so much, but it was through him I quarreled with Marfa Petrovna when I learned that she had dished up this marriage. I want now to see Avdotya Romanovna through your mediation, and if you like, in your presence, to explain to her that in the first place she will never gain anything but harm from Mr. Luzhin. Then begging her pardon for all past unpleasantness, to make her a present of 10,000 rubles, and so assist the rupture with Mr. Luzhin, a rupture to which I believe she is herself not disinclined, if she could see the way to it. You are certainly mad, cried Raskolnikov, not so much angered as astonished. How dare you talk like that? I knew you would scream at me, but in the first place, though I am not rich, this 10,000 rubles is perfectly free. I have absolutely no need for it. If Avdotia Romanovna does not accept it, I shall waste it in some more foolish way. That's the first thing. Secondly, my conscience is perfectly easy. I make the offer with no ulterior motive. You may not believe it, but in the end, Avdotia Romanovna, and you will know. The point is that I did actually cause your sister, whom I greatly respect, some trouble and unpleasantness, and so sincerely regretting it, I want not to compensate, not to repay her for the unpleasantness, but simply to do something to her advantage, to show that I am not, after all, privileged to do nothing but harm. So point if there were a millionth fraction of self-interest in my offer, I should not have made it so openly, and I should not have offered her 10,000 only, when 5 weeks ago I offered her more. Besides, I may, perhaps, very soon marry a young lady, and that alone ought to prevent suspicion of any design on Avdotia Romanovna. In conclusion, let me say that in marrying Mr. Luzhin, she's taking money just the same, only from another man. Don't be angry, Rodion Romanovich. Think it over coolly and quietly. Svidrigailov himself was exceedingly cool and quiet as he was saying this. I beg you to say no more, said Raskolnikov. In any case, this is unpardonable impertinence. Not in the least. Then a man may do nothing but harm to his neighbor in this world, and is prevented from doing the tiniest bit of good by trivial conventional formalities. That's absurd. If I died, for instance, and left that sum to your sister in my will, surely she wouldn't refuse it. Very likely she would. Oh, no, indeed. However, if you receive so be it, though 10,000 rubles is a capital thing to have on occasion. In any case, I beg you to repeat what I have said to Avdotia Romanovna. No, I won't. In that case, Rodion Romanovich, I shall be obliged to try and see her myself and worry her by doing so. And if I do tell her, will you not try to see her? I don't know really what to say. I should like very much to see her once more. Don't hope for it. I'm sorry, but you don't know me. Perhaps we may become better friends. You think we may become friends? And why not? Svidrigailov said, smiling. He stood up and took his hat. I didn't quite intend to disturb you. I came here without reckoning on it, though I was very much struck by your face this morning. Where did you see me this morning? Raskolnikov asked uneasily. I saw you by chance. I kept fancying there is something about you like me, but don't be uneasy. I'm not intrusive. I used to get on all right with car shoppers, and I never bored Prince Ribby, a great personage with a distant relation of mine. And I could write about Raphael's Madonna in Madame Prudhokov's album, and I never left Marfa Petrovna's side for 7 years. And I used to stay the night at Ryazemsky's house in the Haymarket in the old days, and I may go up in a balloon with Bird. Perhaps. All right. Are you starting soon on your troubles, may I ask? What troubles? Why, on that journey. You spoke of it yourself. A journey? Oh, yes. I did speak of a journey. Well, that's a wide subject. If only you knew what you were asking, he added, and gave a sudden loud, short laugh. Perhaps I'll get married instead of the journey. They're making a match for me. Here. Yes. How have you had time for that? But I am very anxious to see Avdotia Romanovna once. I earnestly beg it. Well, goodbye for the present. Oh yes, towards day, I have forgotten something. Tell your sister Rodion Romanovich that Marfa Petrovna remembered her in her will and left her 3,000 rubles. That's absolutely certain. Marfa Petrovna arranged it a week before her death, and it was done in my presence. Avdotia Romanovna will be able to receive the money in 2 or 3 weeks. Are you telling the truth? Yes, tell her. Well, your servant. I'm staying very near you. As he went out, Svidrigailov ran up against Razumihin in the doorway. Chapter 2. It was nearly 8 o'clock. The two young men hurried to Bakalier's to arrive before Luzhin. Why, who was that? Asked Razumihin as soon as they were in the street. It was Svidrigailov, that landowner in whose house my sister was insulted when she was their governess. Through his persecuting her with his attentions, she was turned out by his wife, Marfa Petrovna. This Marfa Petrovna begged Dunia's forgiveness afterwards, and she's just died suddenly. It was of her we were talking this morning. I don't know why I'm afraid of that man. He came here at once, after his wife's funeral. He is very strange and is determined on doing something. We must guard Dunia from him. That's what I wanted to tell you. Do you hear? Guard her. What can we do to harm Avdotia Romanovna? Thank you, Rodia, for speaking to me like that. We will guard her. Where does he live? I don't know. Why didn't you ask? What a pity. Alfandotto. Did you see him? Asked Raskolnikov after a pause. Yes, I noticed him. I noticed him well. You did really see him? You saw him clearly? Raskolnikov insisted. Yes, I remember him perfectly. I should know him in 1,000. I have a good memory for faces. They were silent again. Hmm. That's all right, muttered Raskolnikov. Do you know, I fancied. I keep thinking that it may have been an hallucination. What do you mean? I don't understand you. Well, you all say, Raskolnikov went on, twisting his mouth into a smile, that I am mad. I thought just now that perhaps I really am mad, and have only seen a phantom. What do you mean? Why, who can tell? Perhaps I am really mad, and perhaps everything that happened all these days may be only imagination. Ach, Roger, you've been upset again. But what did he see? What did he come for? Raskolnikov did not answer. Razumihin thought a minute. Now let me tell you my story, he began. I came to you, you were asleep. Then we had dinner, and then I went to Porfiry's. Zametov was still with him. I tried to begin, but it was no use. I couldn't speak in the right way. They don't seem to understand and can't understand, but I'm not a bit ashamed. I drew Porfiry to the window and began talking to him, but it was still no use. He looked away and I looked away. At last I shook my fist in his ugly face and told him, as a cousin, I'd brain him. He merely looked at me. I cursed and came away. That was all. It was very stupid. To Zametov. I did say a word, but, you see, I thought I'd made a mess of it. But as I went downstairs, a brilliant idea struck me. Why should we trouble? Of course, if you were in any danger or anything, but why need you care? You needn't care a hen for them. We shall have a laugh at them afterwards. And if I were in your place, I'd mystify them more than ever. How ashamed they'll be afterwards. Hang them. We can thrash them afterwards, but let's laugh at them now. To be sure, answered Raskolnikov. But what will he say tomorrow? He thought to himself. Strange to say, till that moment it had never occurred to him to wonder what Razumihin would think when he knew. As he thought it, Raskolnikov looked at him. Razumihin's account of his visit to Porfiry had very little interest for him. So much had come and gone since then. In the corridor they came upon Lucian. He had arrived punctually at 8 and was looking for the number, so that all three went in together without greeting or looking at one another. The young man walked in first, where Fyodor Petrovich, for good manners, lingered a little in the passage, taking off his coat. Pulcheria Alexandrovna came forward at once to greet him in the doorway. Donia was welcoming her brother. Fyodor Petrovich walked in and quite amiably, though with redoubled dignity, bowed to the ladies. He looked, however, as though he were a little put out, and could not yet recover himself. Pulcheria Alexandrovna, who seemed also a little embarrassed, hastened to make them all sit down at the round table where a samovar was boiling. Donia and Luzhin were facing one another on opposite sides of the table. Razumihin and Raskolnikov were facing Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Razumihin was next to Luzhin and Raskolnikov was beside his sister. A moment's silence followed. Pyotr Petrovich deliberately drew out a cambric handkerchief, reeking of scent, and blew his nose with an air of a benevolent man who felt himself slighted and was firmly resolved to insist on an explanation. In the passage, the idea had occurred to him to keep on his overcoat and walk away, and so give the two ladies a sharp and emphatic lesson, and make them feel the gravity of the position. But he could not bring himself to do this. Besides, he could not endure uncertainty, and he wanted an explanation. If his request had been so openly disobeyed, there was something behind it, and in that case it was better to find it out beforehand. It rested with him to punish them, and there would always be time for that. I trust you had a favorable journey, he inquired officially of Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Oh, very, Pyotr Petrovich. I am gratified to hear it. And Avdotia Romanovna is not over-fatigued either. I am young and strong, I don't get tired, but it was a great strain for mother, answered Donia. That's unavoidable. Our national railways are of terrible length. Mother Russia, as they say, is a vast country. In spite of all my desire to do so, I was unable to meet you yesterday. But I trust all passed off without inconvenience? Oh no, Pyotr Petrovich, it was all terribly disheartening. Pulcheria Alexandrovna hastened to declare with peculiar intonation, and if Dmitri Prokofitch had not been sent us, I really believe by God himself, we should have been utterly lost. Here he is. Dmitri Prokofitch Razumihin, she added, introducing him to Luzhin. I had the pleasure yesterday, muttered Pyotr Petrovich, with a hostile glance sidelong at Razumihin. Then he scowled and was silent. Pyotr Petrovich belonged to that class of persons, on the surface very polite in society, who make a great point of punctiliousness, but who, directly they are crossed in anything, are completely disconcerted and become more like sacks of flour than elegant and lively men of society. Again all was silent. Raskolnikov was obstinately mute. Avdotya Romanovna was unwilling to open the conversation too soon. Razumihin had nothing to say, so Pulcheria Alexandrovna was anxious again. Marfa Petrovna is dead, have you heard? She began having recourse to her leading item of conversation. To be sure, I heard so. I was immediately informed, and I have come to make you acquainted with the fact that Arkady Ivanovich Svidrigailov set off in haste for Petersburg immediately after his wife's funeral. So at least I have excellent authority for believing. To Petersburg? Here? Donia asked in alarm and looked at her mother. Yes, indeed, and doubtless not without some design, having in view the rapidity of his departure and all the circumstances preceding it. Good heavens! Won't he leave Donia in peace even here? Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. I imagine that neither you nor Avdotia Romanovna have any grounds for uneasiness, unless of course you are yourselves desirous of getting into communication with him. For my part, I am on my guard, and am now discovering where he is lodging. Oh, Pyotr Petrovich, you would not believe what a fright you have given me. Pulcheria Alexandrovna went on. I've only seen him twice, but I thought him terrible, terrible. I am convinced that he was the cause of Marfa Petrovna's death. It's impossible to be certain about that. I have precise information. I do not dispute that he may have contributed to accelerate the course of events by the moral influence, so to say, of the affiant, but as to the general conduct and moral characteristics of that personage, I am in agreement with you. I do not know whether he is well off now, and precisely what Marfa Petrovna left him. This will be known to me within a very short period, but no doubt here in Petersburg, if he has any pecuniary resources, he will relapse at once into his old ways. He is the most depraved and abjectly vicious specimen of that class of men. I have considerable reason to believe that Marfa Petrovna, who was so unfortunate as to fall in love with him and to pay his debts 8 years ago, was of service to him also in another way, solely by her exertions and sacrifices, a criminal charge involving an element of fantastic and homicidal brutality for which he might well have been sentenced to Siberia, was hushed up. That's the sort of man he is, if you care to know. Good heavens! Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Raskolnikov listened attentively. Are you speaking the truth when you say that you have good evidence of this? Dunya asked sternly and emphatically. Huh! I only repeat what I was told in secret by Marfa Petrovna. I must observe that from the legal point of view the case was far from clear. There was, and I believe still is, living here a woman called Restish, a foreigner who lent small sums of money at interest and did other commissions, and with this woman Svidrigailov had for a long while close and mysterious relations. She had a relation, a niece, I believe, living with her, a deaf and dumb girl of 15, or perhaps not more than 14. Wesley hated this girl and grudged her every crust. She used to beat her mercilessly. One day the girl was found hanging in the garret. At the inquest the verdict was suicide. After the usual proceedings the matter ended, but later on information was given that the child had been cruelly outraged by Svidrigailov. It is true, this was not clearly established. The information was given by another German woman of loose character, whose word could not be trusted. No statement was actually made to the police, thanks to Marfa Petrovna's money and exertions. It did not get beyond gossip. And yet the story is a very significant one. You heard, no doubt, Avodia Romanovna, when you were with them, the story of the servant Philip, who died of ill treatment he received 6 years ago, before the abolition of serfdom. I heard, on the contrary, that this Philip hanged himself. Quite so, but what drove him, or rather perhaps disposed him, to suicide was the systematic persecution and severity of Mr. Ikoris. Svidrigailov. I don't know that. answered Dunya dryly. I only heard a queer story that Philip was a sort of hypochondriac, a sort of domestic philosopher, the servants used to say. He read himself silly, and that he hanged himself partly on account of Mr. Svidrigailov's mockery of him and not his blows. When I was there, he behaved well to the servants, and they were actually fond of him, though they certainly did blame him for Philip's death. I perceive, Avdotya Romanovna, that you seem disposed to undertake his defense all of a sudden, Luzhin observed, twisting his lips into an ambiguous smile. There's no doubt that he is an astute man, and insinuating where ladies are concerned, of which Marfa Petrovna, who has died so strangely, is a terrible instance. My only desire has been to be of service to you and your mother with my advice, in view of the renewed efforts which may certainly be anticipated from him. For my part, it's my firm conviction that he will end in a debtor's prison again. Marfa Petrovna had not the slightest intention of settling anything substantial on him, having regard for his children's interests, and if she left him anything, it would only be the merest sufficiency, something insignificant and ephemeral, which would not last a year for a man of his habits. Fyodor Petrovich, I beg you, said Dunya, say no more of Mr. Svidrigailov. Can't. It makes me miserable. He has just been to see me, said Raskolnikov, breaking his silence for the first time. There were exclamations from all, and the old turned to him. Even Pyotr Petrovich was roused. An hour and a half ago, he came in when I was asleep, waked me, and introduced himself, Raskolnikov continued. He was fairly cheerful and at ease, and quite hopes that we shall become friends. He is particularly anxious, by the way, Dunya, for an interview with you, at which he asked me to assist. He has a proposition to make to you, and he told me about it. He told me, too, that a week before her death, Marfa Petrovna left you 3,000 rubles in her will, Dunya, and that you can receive the money very shortly. Thank God, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna, crossing herself. Pray for her soul, Dunya. It's a fact, broke from Luzhin. Tell us, what more? Dunya urged Raskolnikov. Then he said that he wasn't rich, and all the estate was left to his children, who are now with an aunt. Then that he was staying somewhere not far from me. But where? I don't know. I didn't ask. But what? What does he want to propose to Dunya? Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna in a fright. Did he tell you? Yes. What was it? I'll tell you afterwards. Raskolnikov ceased speaking and turned his attention to his tea. Pyotr Petrovich looked at his watch. I am compelled to keep a business engagement, and so I shall not be in your way, he added with an air of some pique, and he began getting up. Don't go, Pyotr Petrovich, said Dunya. You intended to spend the evening. Besides, you wrote yourself that you wanted to have an explanation with mother. Precisely so, Avdotya Romanovna, Pyotr Petrovich answered impressively, sitting down again, but still holding his hat. I certainly desired an explanation with you and your honored mother upon a very important point indeed. But as your brother cannot speak openly in my presence of some proposals of Mr. Svidrigailov, I too do not desire, and am not able to speak openly, in the presence of others, of certain matters of the greatest gravity. Moreover, my most weighty and urgent request has been disregarded. Assuming an aggrieved air, Luzhin relapsed into dignified silence. Your request that my brother should not be present at our meeting was disregarded solely at my instance, said Dunya. You wrote that you had been insulted by my brother. I think that this must be explained at once, and you must be reconciled. And if Rodya really has insulted you, then he shouldn't he whole apologize. Pyotr Petrovich took a stronger line. There are insults, Avdotya Romanovna, which no goodwill can make us forget. There is a line in everything which it is dangerous to overstep, and when it has been overstepped, there is no return. That wasn't what I was speaking of exactly, Pyotr Petrovich, Dunya interrupted with some impatience. Please understand that our whole future depends now on whether all this is explained and set right as soon as possible. I tell you frankly at the start that I cannot look at it in any other light. And if you have the least regard for me, all this business must be ended today, however hard that may be. I repeat that if my brother is to blame, he will ask your forgiveness. I am surprised that you're putting the question like that, said Luzhin, getting more and more irritated. Esteeming, and so to say, adoring you, I may at the same time very well indeed be able to dislike some member of your family. Though I lay claim to the happiness of your hand, I cannot accept duties incompatible with— "Oh, don't be so ready to take offense, Pyotr Petrovich," Dunya interrupted with feeling, "and be the sensible and generous man I have always considered and wish to consider, you to be. I have given you a great promise. I am your betrothed. Trust me in this matter, and, believe me, I shall be capable of judging impartially. My assuming the part of judge is as much a surprise for my brother as for you. When I insisted on his coming to our interview today after your letter, I told him nothing of what I meant to do. Understand that if you are not reconciled, I must choose between you. It must be either you or he. That is how the question rests on your side and on his. I don't want to be mistaken in my choice, and I must not be. For your sake I must break off with my brother. For my brother's sake I must break off with you. I can find out for certain now whether he is a brother to me, and I want to know it, and of you whether I am dear to you, whether you esteem me, whether you are the husband for me." "Avdotia Avromanovna," Luzhin declared huffily, "your words are of too much consequence to me. I will say more. They are offensive in view of the position I have the honor to occupy in relation to you. To say nothing of your strange and offensive setting me on a level with an impertinent boy, you admit the possibility of breaking your promise to me. You say you are he, showing thereby of how little consequence I am in your eyes. I cannot let this pass considering the relationship and the obligations existing between us." "What?" cried Daniel, flushing. "Such an interest, beside all that has hitherto been most precious in my life, what has made up the whole of my life. And here you are offended at my making too little account of you." Raskolnikov smiled sarcastically. Razumihin fidgeted, but Pyotr Petrovich did not accept the reproof. On the contrary, at every word he became more persistent and irritable, as though he relished it. Love for the future partner of your life, for your husband, ought to outweigh your love for your brother, he pronounced sententiously, and in any case I cannot be put on the same level. Although I said so emphatically that I would not speak openly in your brother's presence, nevertheless I intend now to ask your honored mother for a necessary explanation on a point of great importance closely affecting my dignity. Your son. He turned to Porfiry Alexandrovna. "Yesterday, in the presence of Mr. Razsukin. Oh, I think that's it. Excuse me, I have forgotten your surname." He bowed politely to Razumihin. "Insulted me by misrepresenting the idea I expressed to you in a private conversation, drinking coffee, that is, that marriage with a poor girl who has had experience of trouble is more advantageous from the conjugal point of view than with one who has lived in luxury, since it is more profitable for the moral character. Your son intentionally exaggerated the significance of my words and made them ridiculous, accusing me of malicious intentions, and, as far as I could see, relied upon your correspondence with him. I shall consider myself happy, Pulcheria Alexandrovna, if it is possible for you to convince me of an opposite conclusion, and thereby considerately reassure me. Kindly let me know in what terms precisely you repeated my words in your letter to Rodion Romanovich." "I don't remember," faltered Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "I repeated them as I understood them. I don't know how Rotia repeated them to you. Perhaps he exaggerated." "He could not have exaggerated them, except at your instigation." "Pyotr Petrovich," Pulcheria Alexandrovna declared with dignity, "the proof that Dunya and I did not take your words in a very bad sense is the fact that we are here. Good mother, said Dunya approvingly. Then this is my fault again, said Luzhin, aggrieved. Well, Pyotr Petrovich, you keep blaming Rolyon, but you yourself have just written what was false about him. Pulcheria Alexandrovna added, gaining courage. I don't remember writing anything false. You wrote, Raskolnikov said sharply, not turning to Luzhin, that I gave money yesterday not to the widow of the man who was killed, as was the fact, but to his daughter, whom I had never seen till yesterday. You wrote this to make dissension between me and my family, and for that object added coarse expressions about the conduct of a girl whom you don't know. All that is mean slander. Excuse me, sir, said Lucian, quivering with fury. I enlarged upon your qualities and conduct in my letter solely in response to your sister's and mother's inquiries, how I found you, and what impression you made on me. As for what you've alluded to in my letter, be so good as to point out one word of falsehood. Show, that is, that you didn't throw away your money and that there are not worthless persons in that family, however unfortunate. To my thinking, you, with all your virtues, are not worth the little finger of that unfortunate girl at whom you throw stones. Would you go so far, then, as to let her associate with your mother and sister? I have done so already, if you care to know. I made her sit down today with mother and Donia. Radia, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Dunya crimsoned. Razumihin knitted his brows. Luzhin smiled with lofty sarcasm. You may see for yourself, Avdotia Romanovna, he said, whether it is possible for us to agree. I hope now that this question is at an end once and for all. I will withdraw, that I may not hinder the pleasures of family intimacy and the discussion of secrets. He got up from his chair and took his hat. But in withdrawing, I venture to request that for the future I may be spared similar meetings and, so to say, compromises. I appeal particularly to you, honored Pulcheria Alexandrovna, on this subject, the more as my letter was addressed to you and to no one else. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was a little offended. You seem to think we are completely under your authority, Pyotr Petrovich. Donia has told you the reason your desire was disregarded. She had the best intentions. And indeed, you write as though you were laying commands upon me. I would consider every desire of yours as a command. Let me tell you on the contrary that you ought to show particular delicacy and consideration for us now, because we have thrown up everything and have come here relying on you, and so we are in any case in a sense in your hands. That is not quite true, Pulcheria Alexandrovna, especially at the present moment, when the news has come of Marfa Petrovna's legacy, which seems indeed very apropos judging from the new tone you take to me, he added sarcastically. Judging from that remark, we may certainly presume that you were reckoning on our helplessness, Dunet observed irritably. But now, in any case, I cannot reckon on it, and I particularly desire not to hinder your discussion of the secret proposals of Arkady Ivanovich Svidrigailov, which he has entrusted to your brother and which have, I perceive, a great and possibly a very agreeable interest for you. Good heavens! Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Razumihin could not sit still in his chair. Aren't you ashamed now, sister? Asked Raskolnikov. I am ashamed, Rodya, said Dunya. Fyodor Petrovich, go away. She turned to him, white with anger. Pyotr Petrovich had apparently not at all expected such a conclusion. He had too much confidence in himself, in his power, and in the helplessness of his victims. He could not believe it even now. He turned pale, and his lips quivered. Avdotia Romanovna, if I go out to this door now, after such a dismissal, then you may reckon on it I will never come back. Consider what you are doing. My word is not to be shaken. What insolence! Cried Donia, springing up from her seat. I don't want you to come back again. What? So that's how it stands, cried Luzhin, utterly unable to the last moment to believe in the rupture, and so completely thrown out of his reckoning now. So that's how it stands. No, but do you know, Avotuzia Romanovna, but I might protest. What right have you to speak to her like that? Pulcheria Alexandrovna intervened hotly. And what can you protest about? What rights have you? Am I to give my Bilnia to a man like you? Go away, leave us altogether. We are to blame for having agreed to a wrong action, and I above all. But you have bound me, Pulcheria Alexandrovna, Luzin stormed in a frenzy, by your promise, and now you deny it, and besides, I have been led on account of that into expenses. This last complaint was so characteristic of Pyotr Raskolnikov, pale with anger and with the effort of restraining it, could not help breaking into laughter. Pale with anger, but Porfiry Alexandrovna was furious. Expenses? What expenses? Are you speaking of our trunk? But the conductor brought it for nothing for you. Mercy on us, we have bound you. What are you thinking about, Pyotr Petrovich? It was you bound us, hand and foot, not we. Enough, mother, no more, please. Avdotia Romanovna implored. Fyodor Petrovich, do be kind and go. I am going, but one last word, he said, quite unable to control himself. Your mamma seems to have entirely forgotten that I made up my mind to take you, so to speak, after the gossip of the town had spread all over the district in regard to your reputation. Disregarding public opinion for your sake, and reinstating your reputation, I certainly might very well reckon on a fitting return, and might indeed look for gratitude on your part. And my eyes have only now been opened. I see myself that I may have acted very, very recklessly in disregarding the universal verdict. Does the fellow want his head smashed? Cried Razumihin, jumping up. You are a mean and spiteful man, cried Dunya. Not a word. Bah! Not a movement, cried Raskolnikov, holding Razumihin back. Then going close up to Luzhin, kindly leave the room, he said quietly and distinctly, and not a word more. Or Pyotr Petrovich gazed at him for some seconds with a pale face that worked with anger. Then he turned, went out, and rarely has any man carried away in his heart such vindictive hatred as he felt against Raskolnikov. Him, and him alone, he blamed for everything. It is noteworthy that as he went downstairs, he still imagined that his case was perhaps not utterly lost, and that, so far as the ladies were concerned, all might very well indeed be set right again. Chapter 3. The fact was that up to the last moment he had never expected such an ending. He had been overbearing to the last degree, never dreaming that two destitute and defenseless women could escape from his control. This conviction was strengthened by his vanity and conceit, a conceit to the point of fatuity. Pyotr Petrovich, who had made his way up from insignificance, was morbidly given to self-admiration, had the highest opinion of his intelligence and capacities, and sometimes even gloated in solitude over his image in the glass. But what he loved and valued above all was the money he had amassed by his labor, and by all sorts of devices. That money made him the equal of all who had been his superiors. When he had bitterly reminded Donia that he had decided to take her, in spite of evil report, Pyotr Petrovich had spoken with perfect sincerity, and had, indeed, felt genuinely indignant at such black ingratitude. And yet, when he made Donia his offer, he was fully aware of the groundlessness of all the gossip. The story had been everywhere contradicted by Marfa Petrovna, and was by then disbelieved by all the townspeople who were warm in Dunaya's defense. And he would not have denied that he knew all that at the time. Yet he still thought highly of his own resolution in lifting Donia to his level, and regarded it as something heroic. In speaking of it to Donia, he had let out the secret feeling he cherished and admired, and he could not understand that others should fail to admire it too. He had called him Raskolnikov with the feelings of a benefactor who is about to reap the fruits of his good deeds, and to hear agreeable flattery. And as he went downstairs now, he considered himself most undeservedly injured and unrecognized. Donia was simply essential to him. To do without her was unthinkable. For many years he had had voluptuous dreams of marriage, But he had gone on waiting and amassing money. He brooded with relish, in profound secret, over the image of a girl, virtuous, poor. She must be poor, very young, very pretty, of good birth and education, very timid, one who had suffered much and was completely humble before him, one who would all her life look on him as her savior, worship him, admire him, and own him. How many scenes, how many amorous episodes he had imagined on this seductive and playful theme when his work was over. And behold, the dream of so many years was all but realized. The beauty and the education of Avotaya Romanovna had impressed him. Her helpless position had been a great allurement. In her he had found even more than he dreamed of. Here was a girl of pride, character, virtue of education, and breeding, superior to his own. He felt that, and this creature would be slavishly grateful all her life for his heroic condescension, and would humble herself in the dust before him, and he would have absolute, unbounded power over her. Ah, not long before he had, too, after long reflection and hesitation, made an important change in his career and was now entering on a wider circle of business. With this change, his cherished dreams of rising into a higher class of society seemed likely to be realized. He was, in fact, determined to try his fortune in Petersburg. He knew that women could do a very great deal. The fascination of a charming, virtuous, highly educated woman might make his way easier, might do wonders in attracting people to him, throwing an aureole round him, and now everything was in ruins. This sudden, horrible rupture affected him like a clap of thunder. It was like a hideous joke, an absurdity. He had only been a tiny bit masterful, had not even time to speak out, had simply made a joke, been carried away, and it had ended so seriously. And of course, too, he did love Dunya in his own way. He already possessed her in his dreams, and all at once, no. The next day, the very next day, it must all be set right, smoothed over, settled. Above all, he must crush that conceited milksop who was the cause of it all. With a sick feeling, he could not help recalling Razumihin too, but he soon reassured himself on that score, as though a fellow like that could be put on a level with him. The man he really dreaded in earnest was Svidrigailov. He had, in short, a great deal to attend to. No, I am more to blame than anyone, said Dunya, kissing and embracing her mother. I was tempted by his money, but on my honor, brother, I had no idea he was such a base man. If I had seen through him before, nothing would have tempted me. Don't blame me, brother. God has delivered us. God has delivered us. Pulcheria Alexandrovna muttered, but half consciously, as though scarcely able to realize what had happened. They were all relieved, and in 5 minutes they were laughing. Only now and then Dunya turned white and frowned, remembering what had passed. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was surprised to find that she too was glad. She had only that morning thought. Rupture with Luzhin, a terrible misfortune. Razumihin was delighted. He did not yet dare to express his joy fully, but he was in a fever of excitement, as though a ton weight had fallen off his heart. Now he had the right to devote his life to them, to serve them. Anything might happen now, but he felt afraid to think of further possibilities, and dared not let his imagination range. But Raskolnikov sat still in the same place, almost solemn and indifferent. Though he had been the most insistent on getting rid of Lucian, he seemed now the least concerned at what had happened. Dornia could not help thinking that he was still angry with her, and Pulcheria Alexandrovna watched him timidly. "What did Svidrigailov say to you?" said Donia, approaching him. Yes, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Raskolnikov raised his head. He wants to make you a present of 10,000 rubles, and he desires to see you once in my presence. See her! On no account, cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. And how dare he offer her money? Then Raskolnikov repeated, rather dryly, his conversation with Svidrigailov, omitting his account of the ghostly visitations of Marfa Petrovna, wishing to avoid all unnecessary talk. "What answer did you give him?" asked Dunya. "At first I said I would not take any message to you. Then he said that he would do his utmost to obtain an interview with you without my help. He assured me that his passion for you was a passing infatuation. Now he has no feeling for you. He doesn't want you to marry Ruzhin." His talk was altogether rather modern. "How do you explain him to yourself, Roger?" "How did he strike you?" "I must confess I don't quite understand him. He offers you 10,000 and yet says he is now well off. He says he is going away and in 10 minutes he forgets he has said it. Then he says, is he going to be married and has already fixed on the girl. No doubt he has a motive and probably a bad one. But it's odd that he should be so clumsy about it if he had any designs against you. Of course I refused this money on your account once for all. Altogether, I thought him very strange. One might almost think he was mad, but I may be mistaken. That may only be the part he assumes. The death of Marfa Petrovna seems to have made a great impression on him." "God rest her soul!" exclaimed Pulcheria Alexandrovna. "I shall always, always pray for her. Where should we be now, Dumai, without this 3,000? It's as though it had fallen from heaven. Why, Rodia, this morning we had only 3 rubles in our pocket, and Donia and I were just planning to pawn her watch, so as to avoid borrowing from that man until he offered help. Donia seemed strangely impressed by Svidrigailov's offer. She still stood meditating. "He has got some terrible plan," she said in a half-whisper to herself, almost shuddering. Raskolnikov noticed this disproportionate terror. "I fancy I shall have to see him more than once again," he said to Dunya. "We will watch him." "I will track him out," cried Razmin vigorously. "I won't lose sight of him. Rodya has given me leave. He said to me himself just now, 'Take care of my sister.' Will you give me leave, too, Avatia Romanovna?" Dunya smiled and held out her hand, but the look of anxiety did not leave her face. Porfiry Alexandrovna gazed at her timidly, but the 3,000 rubles had obviously a soothing effect on her. A quarter of an hour later, they were all engaged in a lively conversation. Even Raskolnikov listened attentively for some time, though he did not talk. Razumihin was the speaker. "And why? Why should you go away?" He flowed on ecstatically. "And what are you to do in a little town? The great thing is, you are all here together, and you need one another. You do need one another. Believe me, for a time anyway. Ta-da! Take me into partnership, and I assure you we'll plan a capital enterprise. Listen, I'll explain it all in detail to you, the whole project. It all flashed into my head this morning before anything had happened. I tell you what, I have an uncle. I must introduce him to you. A most accommodating and respectable man. This uncle has got a capital of 1,000 rubles, and he lives on his pension and has no need of that money. For the last 2 years he has been bothering me to borrow it from him and pay him 6%. Interested. I know what that means. He simply wants to help me. Last year I had no need of it, but this year I resolved to borrow it as soon as he arrived. Then you lend me another 1,000 of your 3 and we have enough for a start, so we'll go into partnership. And what are we going to do?" Then Razumin began to unfold his project, and he explained at length that almost all our publishers and booksellers know nothing at all of what they are selling, and for that reason they are usually bad publishers, and that any decent publications pay as a rule and give a profit, sometimes a considerable one. That Razumihin had, indeed, been dreaming of setting up as a publisher. For the last 2 years he had been working in publishers' offices and knew 3 European languages well, though he had told Raskolnikov 6 days before that he was schwach in German, with an object of persuading him to take half his translation and half the payment for it. He had told a lie then, and Raskolnikov knew he was lying. Why? Why should we let our chance slip when we have one of the chief means of success money of our own? Cried Razumihin warmly. Of course there will be a lot of work, but we will work you, Avatatya Romanovna, I, Rodion. You get a splendid profit on some books nowadays. And the great point of the business is that we shall know just what wants translating, and we shall be translating, publishing, learning all at once. I can be of use because I have experience. For nearly 2 years I've been scuttling about among the publishers, and now I know every detail of their business. You need not be a saint to make pots, believe me. And why? Why should we let our chance slip? Why, I know, and I kept the secret 2 or 3 books which one might get 100 rubles simply for thinking of translating and publishing. Indeed, and I would not take 500 for the very idea of one of them. And what do you think if I were to tell a publisher? I dare say he'd hesitate, they are such blockheads. And as for the business side, printing, paper, selling, you trust to me, I know my way about. We'll begin in a small way and go on to a large. In any case, it will get us our living and we shall get back our capital. Donia's eyes shone. I like what you are saying, Dmitri Prokofitch, she said. I know nothing about it, of course, put in Pulcheria Alexandrovna. It may be a good idea, but again, God knows. It's new and untried. Of course, we must remain here at least for a time. She looked at Rodia. What do you think, brother? Said Dunya. Huh, I think he's got a very good idea, he answered. Of course, it's too soon to dream of a publishing firm, but we certainly might bring out 5 or 6 books and be sure of success. I know of one book myself which would be sure to go well, and as for his being able to manage it, there's no doubt about that either. He knows the business. But we can talk it over later. Hurrah! Cried Razumin. No, stay. There's a flat here in this house belonging to the same owner. It's a special thought apart, not communicating with these lodgings. It's furnished, rent moderate, 3 rooms. Suppose you take them to begin with. I'll pawn your watch tomorrow and bring you the money, and everything can be arranged then. You can all 3 live together, and Rodia will be with you. But where are you off to, Rodia? What, Rodia, you are going already? Pulcheria Alexandrovna asked in dismay. Puh! At such a minute? Cried Razumihin. Dunya looked at her brother with incredulous wonder. He held his cap in his hand. He was preparing to leave him. One would think you were burying me or saying goodbye forever, he said somewhat oddly. He attempted to smile, but it did not turn out a smile. But who knows, perhaps it is the last time we shall see each other. He let slip accidentally. It was what he was thinking, and it somehow was uttered aloud. What is the matter with you? Cried his mother. Huh! Where are you going, Rodya? Asked Dunya rather strangely. Oh, I'm quite obliged to, he answered vaguely, as though hesitating what he would say. But there was a look of sharp determination in his white face. I meant to say, as I was coming here, I meant to tell you, mother, and you, Dunya, that it would be better for us to part for a time. I feel ill. I am not at peace. I will come afterwards. I will come out myself when it's possible. I remember you and love you. Leave me alone. I decided this even before I am absolutely resolved on it. Whatever may come to me, whether I come to ruin or not, I want to be alone. Forget me altogether is better. Don't inquire about me. When I can, I'll come on myself or I'll send for you. Perhaps it will all come back. But now if you love me, give me up. Else I shall begin to hate you. I feel it. Goodbye. Good God! Cried Pulcheria Alexandrovna. Both his mother and his sister were terribly alarmed. Razumihin was also. Roja, be reconciled with us. Let us be as before, cried his poor mother. He turned slowly to the door and slowly went out of the room. Donia overtook him. Brother, what are you doing to mother? She whispered, her eyes flashing with indignation. He looked dully at her. No matter, I shall come. I'm coming, he muttered in an undertone, as though not fully conscious of what he was saying, and he went out of the room. Wicked, "Heartless egoist!" cried Dunya. "He's insane, but not heartless. He is mad. Don't you see it? You're heartless after that." Razumihin whispered in her ear, squeezing her hand tightly. "I shall be back directly," he shouted to the horror-stricken mother, and he ran out of the room. Raskolnikov was waiting for him at the end of the passage. "I knew you would run after me," he said. "Go back to them, be with them tomorrow and always. Perhaps I shall come, if I can. Goodbye," and without holding out his hand, he walked away. "But where are you going?" "What are you doing?" "Ah, what's the matter with you?" "How can you go on like this?" Razumihin muttered at his wits' end. Raskolnikov stopped once more. "Once for all, never ask me about anything. I have nothing to tell you. Don't come to see me. Maybe I'll come here. Believe me, but don't leave them. Do you understand me?" It was dark in the corridor. They were standing near the lamp. For a minute they were looking at one another in silence. Razumihin remembered that minute all his life. Raskolnikov's burning and intent eyes grew more penetrating every moment, piercing into his soul, into his consciousness. Suddenly Razumihin started. Something strange, as it were, passed between them. Some idea, some hint, as it were, slipped. Something awful, hideous, and suddenly understood on both sides. Razumihin turned pale. "Twelve. Do you understand now?" said Raskolnikov, his face twitching nervously. "Huh! Go back, go to them," he said suddenly, and turning quickly, he went out of the house. I will not attempt to describe how Razumihin went back to the ladies, how he soothed them, how he protested that Rodya needed rest in his illness, protested that Rodya was sure to come, that he would come every day, that he was very, very much upset, that he must not be irritated, that he, Razumihin, would watch over him, would get him a doctor, the best doctor, a consultation. But tea. In fact, from that evening, Razumihin took his place with them as a son and a brother. Chapter 4. Raskolnikov went straight to the house on the canal bank where Sonia lived. It was an old greenhouse of 3 stories. He found the porter and obtained from him vague directions as to the whereabouts of Kapernaumov, the tailor. Having found, in the corner of the courtyard, the entrance to the dark and narrow staircase, he mounted to the 2nd floor and came out into a gallery that ran round the whole 2nd story over the yard. While he was wandering in the darkness, uncertain where to turn for Kapernaumov's door, a door opened 3 paces from him. He mechanically took hold of it. "Who is there?" a woman's voice asked uneasily. "It's I, come to see you," answered Raskolnikov, and he walked into the tiny entry. On a broken chair stood a candle and a battered copper candlestick. "It's you." "Good heavens!" cried Sonia weakly, and she stood rooted to the spot. "Which is your room?" "This way," and Raskolnikov, trying not to look at her, hastened in. A minute later Sonia, too, came in with the candle, set down the candlestick, and, completely disconcerted, stood before him inexpressibly agitated and apparently frightened by his unexpected visit. The color rushed suddenly to her pale face and tears came into her eyes. She felt sick and ashamed and happy too. Raskolnikov turned away quickly and sat on a chair by the table. He scanned the room in a rapid glance. It was a large but exceedingly low-pitched room, the only one led by the Kapernaumovs, to whose rooms a closed door led in the wall on the left. In the opposite side on the right-hand wall was another door, always kept locked. That led to the next flat, which formed the separate lodging. Sonia's room looked like a barn. It was a very irregular quadrangle, and this gave it a grotesque appearance. A wall with 3 windows looking out onto the canal ran aslant, so that one corner formed a very acute angle, and it was difficult to see in it without very strong light. The other corner was disproportionately obtuse. There was scarcely any furniture in the big room. In the corner on the right was a bedstead. Beside it, nearest the door, a chair. A plain deal table covered by a blue cloth stood against the same wall, close to the door into the other flat. Two rush-bottom chairs stood by the table. On the opposite wall, near the acute angle, stood a small plain wooden chest of drawers, looking as it were lost in a desert. That was all there was in the room. The yellow, scratched and shabby wallpaper was black in the corners. It must have been damp and full of fumes in the winter. There was every sign of poverty. Even the bedstead had no curtain. Sonia looked in silence at her visitor, who was so attentively and unceremoniously scrutinizing her room, and even began at last to tremble with terror, as though she was standing before her judge and the arbiter of her destinies. "I'm late." "It's 11, isn't it?" he asked, still not lifting his eyes. "Ha ha! Yes," muttered Sonia. "Oh yes, it is," she added hastily, as though in that lay her means of escape. "My landlady's clock has just struck. I heard it myself. I've come to you for the last time," Raskolnikov went on gloomily. "Although this was the first time, I may perhaps not see you again. Are you going away?" "I don't know. Tomorrow." "Then you are not coming to Katerina Ivanovna tomorrow?" Sonia's voice shook. "I don't know. Oh, I shall know tomorrow morning." "Never mind that. I've come to say one word." He raised his brooding eyes to her and suddenly noticed that he was sitting down while she was all the while standing before him. "Why are you standing?" "Sit down," he said in a changed voice, gentle and friendly. She sat down. He looked kindly and almost compassionately at her. "How thin you are! What a hand!" "Quite transparent, like a dead hand." He took her hand. Sonia smiled faintly. "I have always been like that," she said. "Tch, even when you lived at home." "Yes, of course you were," he added abruptly, and the expression of his face and the sound of his voice changed again suddenly. He looked around him once more. "You rent this room from the Kapernaumovs?" "Yes." "Do you live there? To that door?" "Yes." "They have another room like this." "All in one room?" "Yes." "I should be afraid in your room at night," he observed gloomily. "They are very good people, very kind," answered Sonia, who still seemed bewildered. "And all the furniture, everything is theirs. And they are very kind, and the children, too, often come to singing." "They all stammer, don't they?" "Yes." "He stammers and is lame. And his wife, too." "It's not exactly that she stammers, but she can't speak plainly. She is a very kind woman, and he used to be a house serf. And there are 7 children, and it's only the eldest one that stammers, and the others are simply ill, but they don't stammer." "But where did you hear about them?" she added with some surprise. "Your father told me then." "He told me all about you, and how you went out at 6 o'clock and came back at 9, and how Katerina Ivanovna knelt down by your bed." Sonia was confused. "I fancied I saw him today," she whispered hesitatingly. "Whom?" "Father. I was walking in the street, out there at the corner, about 10 o'clock, and he seemed to be walking in front. It looked just like him." "I wanted to go to Katerina Ivanovna. You were walking in the streets?" "Yes," Sonia whispered abruptly, again overcome with confusion and looking down. "Katerina Ivanovna used to beat you, I dare say." "Oh no, what are you saying?" "No." Sonia looked at him almost with dismay. "You love her, then?" "Love her?" "Of course," said Sonia with plaintive emphasis, and she clasped her hands in distress. "Ah, you don't, Dodo. If you only knew. You see, she is quite like a child. Her mind is quite unhinged, you see, from sorrow. And how clever she used to be, how generous, how kind. Ah, you don't understand. You don't understand." Sonia said this as though in despair, wringing her hands in excitement and distress. Her pale cheeks flushed. There was a look of anguish in her eyes. It was clear that she was stirred to the very depths, that she was longing to speak, to champion, to express something. A sort of insatiable compassion, if one may so express it, was reflected in every feature of her face. Beat me. How can you? Good heavens, beat me. And if she did beat me, what then? What of it? You know nothing about it. She is so unhappy, how unhappy. And you be to the. She is seeking righteousness. She is pure. She has such faith that there must be righteousness everywhere and she expects it. And if you were to torture her, she wouldn't do wrong. She doesn't see that it's impossible for people to be righteous and she is angry at it. Like a child, like a child. She is good. And what will happen to you? Sonia looked at him inquiringly. They are left on your hands, you see. They were all on your hands before, though, and your father came to you to beg for drink. Well, how will it be now? I don't know, Sonia articulated mournfully. Will they stay there? I don't know. They are in debt for the lodging, but the landlady, I hear, said today that she wanted to get rid of them, and Katerina Ivanovna says that she won't stay another minute. How is it she's so bold? She relies upon you? Oh no, don't talk like that. We are one. We live like one. Sonia was agitated again and even angry, as though a canary or some other little bird were to be angry. And what could she do? What could she do? She persisted, getting hot and excited. And how she cried today, her mind is unhinged. Haven't you noticed it? At one minute she is worrying like a child that everything should be right tomorrow. The lunch and all that. Then she is wringing her hands, spitting blood, weeping, and all at once she will begin knocking her head against the wall, in despair. Then she will be comforted again. She builds all hopes on you. She says that you will help her now, and that she will borrow a little money somewhere and go to her native town with me and set up a boarding school for the daughters of gentlemen, and take me to superintend it, and we will begin a new splendid life. And she kisses and hugs me, comforts me, and you know she has such faith in her fancies. One can't contradict her. And all the day long she has been washing, cleaning, mending. She dragged the washtub into the room with her feeble hands and sank on the bed, gasping for breath. We went this morning to the shops to buy shoes for Polenka and Lida, for theirs are quite worn out. Only the money we'd reckoned wasn't enough, not nearly enough, and she picked out such dear little boots, for she has taste, you don't know. And there in the shop she burst out crying before the shopman because she hadn't enough. Ah, it was sad to see her. Well, after that, I can understand your living like this, Raskolnikov said with a bitter smile. And aren't you sorry for them? Huh! Aren't you sorry? Sonia flew at him again. Huh! Why, I know you gave your last penny yourself, though you'd seen nothing of it. And if you'd seen everything, oh dear! And how often I brought her to tears. Only last week. Yes, only a week before his death. I was cruel. And how often I've done it. Ah, I've been wretched at the thought of it all day. Sonia wrung her hands as she spoke, at the pain of remembering it. You were cruel? Yes, I went to see them, she went on weeping, and father said, read me something, Sonia, my head aches. Read to me, here's the book. He had a book he had got from Andrei Semyonovich Lebeziadnikov. He lives there, he always used to get hold of such funny books. And I said, I can't stay, as I didn't want to read, and I'd gone in chiefly to show Katerina Ivanovna some collars. Lizaveta, the peddler, sold me some collars and cuffs cheap, pretty, new, embroidered ones. Katerina Ivanovna liked them very much. She put them on and looked at herself in the glass and was delighted with them. Make me a present of them, Sonia, she said. Please do. Please do. She said she wanted them so much. And when could she wear them? They just reminded her of old happy days. She looked at herself in the glass, admired herself, and she has no clothes at all, no things of her own. Hasn't had all these years, and she never asks anyone for anything. She is proud. She'd sooner give away everything. And these she asked for. She liked them so much, and I was sorry to give them. What use are they to you, Katerina Ivanovna? I said. I spoke like that to her. I ought not to have said that. She gave me such a look, and she was so grieved at my refusing her, and it was so sad to see. And she was not grieved for the colors, but for my refusing. I saw that. Ah, if only I could bring it all back, change it, take back those words. Ah, but it's nothing to you. Did you know Lizaveta, the peddler? Yes. Did you know her? Sonia asked with some surprise. Katerina Ivanovna is in consumption, rapid consumption. She will soon die, said Raskolnikov after a pause, without answering her question. Oh, no, no. And Sonia unconsciously clutched both his hands as though imploring that she should not. But it will be better if she does die. No, not better, not at all better, Sonia unconsciously repeated in dismay. And the children? What can you do except take them to live with you? Oh, I don't know, cried Sonia, almost in despair, and she put her hands to her head. It was evident that that idea had very often occurred to her before, and he had only roused it again. And what if even now, while Katerina Ivanovna is alive, you get ill and are taken to the hospital, what will happen then? He persisted pitilessly. How can you? That cannot be. And Sonia's eyes worked with awful terror. Cannot be? Raskolnikov went on with a harsh smile. You are not insured against it, are you? What will happen to them then? They will be in the street, all of them. She will cough and beg and knock her head against some wall, as she did today, and the children will cry, "Eh!" Then she will fall down, be taken to the police station and to the hospital. She will die, and the children? Oh no, God will not let it be, broke at last from Sonia's overburdened bosom. She listened, looking imploringly at him, clasping her hands in dumb entreaty, as though it all depended upon him. Raskolnikov got up and began to walk about the room. A minute passed. Sonia was standing with her hands and her head hanging in terrible dejection. And can't you save? Put by for a rainy day? He asked, stopping suddenly before her. No, whispered Sonia. Of course not. I tried. He added almost ironically. Yes, and it didn't come off. Of course not. No need to ask. And again he paced the room. Another minute passed. You don't get money every day. Sonia was more confused than ever, and color rushed into her face again. No, she whispered with a painful effort. It will be the same with Polanka, no doubt, he said suddenly. No, no, it can't be, no. Sonia cried aloud in desperation, as though she had been stabbed. God would not allow anything so awful. He lets others come to it. No, no, God will protect her. God, she repeated beside herself. But perhaps there is no God at all, Raskolnikov answered with a sort of malignance, laughed, and looked at her. Sonia's face suddenly changed. A tremor passed over it. She looked at him with unutterable reproach, tried to say something, but could not speak, and broke into bitter, bitter sobs, hiding her face in her hands. You say Katerina Ivanovna's mind is unhinged. Your own mind is unhinged, he said after a brief silence. 5 minutes passed. He still paced up and down the room in silence, not looking at her. At last he went up to her. His eyes glittered. He put his 2 hands on her shoulders and looked straight into her tearful face. His eyes were hard, feverish, and piercing. His lips were twitching. All at once he bent down quickly and, dropping to the ground, kissed her foot. Sonia drew back from him as from a madman, and certainly he looked like a madman. What are you doing to me? She muttered, turning pale and a sudden anguish clutched at her heart. He stood up at once. I did not bow down to you. I bowed down to all the suffering of humanity, he said wildly and walked away to the window. Listen, he added, turning to Raymond later. I said just now to an insolent man that it was not worth your little finger, and that I did my sister honor making her sit beside you. Ach, you said that to them. And in their presence? Cried Sonia, frightened. Sit down with me. In honor. Uh, why, I'm dishonorable. Ah, why did you say that? It was not because of your dishonor and your sin. I said that of you, but because of your great suffering. But you are a great sinner, that's true, he added almost solemnly. And your worst sin is that you have destroyed and betrayed yourself for nothing. Isn't that fearful? Isn't it fearful that you are living in this filth which you loathe so, and at the same time you know yourself, you've only to open your eyes, that you are not helping anyone by it, not saving anyone from anything? Tell me, he went on almost in a frenzy, how this shame and degradation can exist in you side by side with other opposite holy feelings. It would be better, 1,000 times better and wiser to leap into the water and end it all. But what would become of them? Sonia asked faintly, gazing at him with eyes of anguish, but not seeming surprised at his suggestion. Raskolnikov looked strangely at her. He read it all in her face. So she must have had that thought already, perhaps many times, and earnestly she had thought out in her despair how to end it, and so earnestly that now she scarcely wondered at his suggestion. She had not even noticed the cruelty of his words, the significance of his reproaches, and his peculiar attitude. Her shame she had, of course, not noticed either, and that too was clear to him. But he saw how monstrously the thought of her disgraceful, shameful position was torturing her, and had long tortured her. What, he thought, could hitherto have hindered her from putting an end to it? Only then he realized what those poor little orphan children, and that pitiful half-crazy Katerina Ivanovna, knocking her head against the wall in her consumption, meant for Sonia. But nevertheless, it was clear to him again that, with her character and the amount of education she had after all received, she could not in any case remain so. He was still confronted by the question, how could she have remained so long in that position without going out of her mind, since she could not bring herself to jump into the water? Of course he knew that Sonia's position was an exceptional case, though unhappily not unique and not infrequent indeed, but that very exceptionalness, her tinge of education, her previous life, might, one would have thought, have killed her at the first step on that revolting path. What held her up surely not depravity. All that infamy had obviously only touched her mechanically. Not one drop of real depravity had penetrated to her heart. He saw that. He saw through her as she stood before him. There are three ways before, he thought, the canal, the madhouse, or at last to sink into depravity which obscures the mind and turns the heart to stone. The last idea was the most revolting, but he was a skeptic. He was young, abstract, and therefore cruel, and so he could not help believing that the last end was the most likely. But can that be true? He cried to himself. Can that creature who still preserve the purity of her spirit be consciously drawn at last into that sink of filth and iniquity? Can the process already have begun? Can it be that she has only been able to bear it till now, because vice has begun to be less loathsome to her? No, no, that cannot be, he cried, as Sonia had just before. No, what has kept her from the canal till now is the ideal of sin, and they, the children. And if she has not gone out of her mind, but who says she has not gone out of her mind? Is she in her senses? Can one talk? Can one reason as she does? How can she sit on the edge of the abyss of loathsomeness into which she is slipping and refuse to listen when she is told of danger? Does she expect a miracle? No doubt she does. Doesn't that all mean madness? He stayed obstinately at that thought. He liked that explanation indeed better than any other. He began looking more intently at her. "So you pray to God a great deal, Sonia?" he asked her. Sonia did not speak. He stood beside her waiting for an answer. "What should I be without God?" she whispered rapidly, forcibly, glancing at him with suddenly flashing eyes and squeezing his hand. "Ah, so that is it," he thought. "And what does God do for you?" he asked, probing her further. Sonia was silent a long while, as though she could not answer. Her rich chest kept heaving with emotion. "Be silent. Don't ask." "You don't deserve," she cried suddenly, looking sternly and wrathfully at him. That's it," he repeated to himself. "It does everything," she whispered quickly, looking down again. "That's the way out." "That's the explanation," he decided, scrutinizing her with eager curiosity, with a new, strange, almost morbid feeling. He gazed at that pale, thin, irregular, angular little face, those soft blue eyes which could flash with such fire, such stern energy, that little body still shaking with indignation and anger, and it all seemed to him more and more strange, almost impossible. "She is a religious maniac," he repeated to himself. There was a book lying on the chest of drawers. He had noticed it every time he paced up and down the room. Now he took it up and looked at it. It was the New Testament in the Russian translation. It was bound in leather, old and worn. "Where did you get that?" he called to her across the room. She was still standing in the same place, 3 steps from the table. "It was brought me," she answered, as it were unwillingly, not looking at him. "Who brought it?" "Lizaveta. I asked her for it." "Lizaveta." Strange, he thought. Everything about Sonia seemed to him stranger, and more wonderful every moment. He carried the book to the candle, and began to turn over the pages. "Where is the story of Lazarus?" he asked suddenly. Sonia looked obstinately at the ground and would not answer. She was standing sideways to the table. "Where is the raising of Lazarus?" "Find it for me, Sonia." She stole a glance at him. "You are not looking in the right place. It's in the 4th Gospel," she whispered sternly, without looking at him. "Find it and read it to me," he said. He sat down with his elbow on the table, leaned his head on his hand, and looked away sullenly, prepared to listen. "In 3 weeks' time they'll welcome me in the madhouse. I shall be there, if I am not in a worse place," he muttered to himself. Sonia heard Raskolnikov's request distrustfully and moved hesitatingly to the table. She took the book, however. "Haven't you read it?" she asked, looking up at him across the table. Her voice became sterner and sterner. "Long ago, when I was at school." "Read? And haven't you heard it in church?" "I haven't been." "Do you often go?" No," whispered Sonia. Raskolnikov smiled. "I understand. You won't go to your father's funeral tomorrow?" "Yes, I shall. I was at church last week, too. I had a requiem service. For whom? For Lizaveta." "She was killed with an axe." His nerves were more and more strained. His head began to go round. "Were you friends with Lizaveta?" "Yes. She was good. She used to come. Not often. She couldn't. We used to read together and talk." She will see God. The last phrase sounded strange in his ears, and here was something new again. The mysterious meetings with Lizaveta, and both of them religious maniacs. "I shall be a religious maniac myself soon. It's infectious." "Read," he cried irritably and insistently. Sonia still hesitated. Her heart was throbbing. She hardly dared to read to him. He looked almost with exasperation at the unhappy lunatic. "What for? You don't believe?" she whispered softly and as it were breathlessly. "Read." "I want you to," he persisted. "You used to read to Lizaveta." Sonia opened the book and found the place. Her hands were shaking. Her voice failed her. Twice she tried to begin and could not bring out the first syllable. "Now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany." She forced herself at last to read, but at the 3rd word her voice broke, like an overstrained string. There was a catch in her breath. Raskolnikov saw in part why Sonia could not bring herself to read to him, and the more he saw this, the more wrathfully and irritably he insisted on her doing so. He understood only too well how painful it was for her to betray and unveil all that was her own. He understood that these feelings really were a secret treasure which she had kept perhaps for years, perhaps from childhood, while she lived with an unhappy father and a distracted stepmother, crazed by grief, in the midst of starving children and unseemly abuse and reproaches. But at the same time he knew now and knew for certain that, although it filled her with dread and suffering, yet she had a tormenting desire to read and to read to him that he might hear it and to read now whatever might come of it. He read this in her eyes. He could see it in her intense emotion. She mastered herself, controlled the spasm in her throat, and went on reading the 11th chapter of St. Luke. John, Job. She went on to the 19th verse. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. But Mary sat still in the house. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it thee. Then she stopped again with a shamefaced feeling that her voice would quiver and break again. Jesus said unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this? She said unto him, and drawing a painful breath, Sonia read distinctly and forcibly as though she were making a public confession of faith. Yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. She stopped and looked up quickly at him, but controlling herself went on reading. Raskolnikov sat without moving, his elbows on the table and his eyes turned away. She read to the 32nd verse. Then when Mary was come where Jesus was, and saw him, she fell down at his feet, saying unto him, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in the spirit, and was troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Then said the Jews, Behold how he loved him. And some of them said, Could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind have caused that even this man should not have died? Raskolnikov turned and looked at her with emotion. Yes, he had known it. She was trembling in a real physical fever. He had expected it. She was getting near the story of the greatest miracle, and the feeling of immense triumph came over her. Her voice rang out like a bell. Triumph and joy gave it power. The lines danced before her eyes, but she knew what she was reading by heart. At the last verse, could not this man which opened the eyes of the blind, dropping her voice, she passionately reproduced the doubt, the reproach and censure of the blind disbelieving Jews, who in another moment would fall at his feet as though struck by thunder, sobbing and believing. And he too is blinded and unbelieving. He too will hear. He too will believe. Yes, yes. At once now was what she was dreaming, and she was quivering with happy anticipation. Jesus therefore again groaning in himself, coming to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. Jesus said, Take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he had been dead 4 days. She laid emphasis on the word 4. Jesus saith unto her, said I, not unto thee that, if thou wouldest believe, thou shouldest see the glory of God? Then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always, But because of the people which stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth. She read loudly, cold and trembling with ecstasy, as though she was seeing it before her eyes. Bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, Loose him and let him go. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Jesus did believed in him. She could read no more, closed the book, and got up from her chair quickly. That is all about the raising of Lazarus, she whispered severely and abruptly, and turning away she stood motionless, not daring to raise her eyes to him. She still trembled feverishly. The candle end was flickering out in the battered candlestick, dimly lighting up in the poverty-stricken room the murderer and the harlot who had so strangely been reading together the eternal book. 5 minutes or more passed. I came to speak of something, Raskolnikov said aloud, frowning. He got up and went to Sonia. She lifted the eyes to him in silence. His face was particularly stern, and there was a sort of savage determination in it. I have abandoned my family today, he said. My mother and sister. I am not going to see them. I've broken with them completely. What for? Asked Sonia, amazed. Her recent meeting with his mother and sister had left a great impression which she could not analyze. She heard his news almost with horror. I have only you now, he added. Let us go together. I've come to you. We are both accursed. Let us go our way together. His eyes glittered as though he were mad, Sonia thought. In her turn, go where? She asked in alarm, and she involuntarily stepped back. How do I know? I only know it's the same road. I know that and nothing more. It's the same goal. She looked at him and understood nothing. She knew only that he was terribly, infinitely unhappy. No one of them will understand if you tell them. But I have understood. I need you. That is why I've come to you. I don't understand, whispered Sonia. You will understand later. Haven't you done the same? You too have transgressed, have had the strength to transgress. You have laid hands on yourself. You have destroyed a life, your own. It's all the same. You might have lived in spirit and understanding, but you end in the Haymarket. But you won't be able to stand it. And if you remain alone, you go out of your mind like me. You are like a mad creature already. So we must go together on the same road. Let us go. What for? What's all this for? Said Sonia, strangely and violently agitated by his words. What for? Because you can't remain like this, that's why. You must look things straight in the face at last, and not weep like a child and cry that God won't allow it. What will happen if you should really be taken to the hospital tomorrow? She is mad and in consumption, she'll soon die, and the children. Do you mean to tell me? Well, Lenka won't come to grief. Haven't you seen children here at the street corners sent out by their mothers to beg? I found out where those mothers live and in what surroundings. Children can't remain children there. At 7, the child is vicious and a thief. Yet children, you know, are the image of Christ. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He bought us honor and loved them. They are the humanity of the future. What's to be done? What's to be done? What's to be done? Repeated Sonia, weeping hysterically and wringing her hands. What's to be done? Break what must be broken, once for all, that's all, and take the suffering on oneself. What? You don't understand. You'll understand later. Freedom and power, and above all, power. Over all trembling creation and all the ant heap. That's the goal, remember that. That's my farewell message. Perhaps it's the last time I shall speak to you. If I don't come tomorrow, you'll hear of it all, and then remember these words. And some day later on, in years to come, you'll understand perhaps what they meant. If I come tomorrow, I'll tell you who killed Lizaveta. Goodbye. Sonia started with terror. What do you know who killed her? She asked, chilled with horror, looking wildly at him. I know, and will tell. You, only you. I have chosen you out. I'm not coming to you to ask forgiveness, but simply to tell you. I chose you out long ago to hear this. When your father thought of you, and when Lisabetta was alive, I thought of it. Goodbye, don't shake hands. Tomorrow, he went out. Sonia gazed at him as at a madman, but she herself was like one insane and felt it. Her head was going round. Good heavens! How does he know who killed Lizaveta? What did those words mean? It's awful. But at the same time, the idea did not enter her head. Not for a moment. Oh, he must be terribly unhappy. He has abandoned his mother and sister. What for? What has happened? And what had he in his mind? What did he say to her? He had kissed her foot and said, yes, he had said it clearly, that he could not live without her. Oh, merciful heavens! Sonia spent the whole night feverish and delirious. She jumped up from time to time, wept and wrung her hands, then sank again into feverish sleep and dreamt of Polenka, Katerina Ivanovna, and Lizaveta, of reading the Gospel, and him with pale face, with burning eyes, kissing her feet, weeping. On the other side of the door on the right, which divided Sonia's room from Madame Reslitz's flat, was a room which had long stood empty. A card was fixed on the gate, and a notice stuck in the windows over the canal advertising it to let. Sonia had long been accustomed to the rooms being uninhabited, but all that time Mr. Svidrigailov had been standing, listening at the door of the empty room. When Raskolnikov went out he stood still, thought a moment, went on tiptoe to his own room which adjoined the empty one, brought a chair and noiselessly carried it to the door that led to Sonia's room. The conversation had struck him as interesting and remarkable, and he had greatly enjoyed it, so much so that he brought a chair, that he might not in the future, tomorrow, for instance, have to endure the inconvenience of standing a whole hour, but might listen in comfort. Chapter 5. When next morning at 11 o'clock punctually, Raskolnikov went into the department of the investigation of criminal causes and sent his name in to Porfiry Petrovich. He was surprised at being kept waiting so long. It was at least 10 minutes before he was summoned. He had expected that they would pounce upon him, but he stood in the waiting room, and people, who apparently had nothing to do with him, were continually passing to and fro before him. In the next room, which looked like an office, several clerks were sitting writing, and obviously they had no notion who or what Raskolnikov might be. He looked uneasily and suspiciously about him to see whether there was not some guard, some mysterious watch being kept on him to prevent his escape. But there was nothing of the sort. He saw only the faces of clerks absorbed in petty details. Then other people. No one seemed to have any concern with him. He might go where he liked for them. The conviction grew stronger in him that if that enigmatic man of yesterday, that phantom sprung out of the earth, had seen everything, they would not have let him stand and wait like that. And would they have waited till he elected to appear at 11? Either the man had not yet given information, or simply he knew nothing, had seen nothing, and how could he have seen anything? And so all that had happened to him the day before was again a phantom exaggerated by his sick and overstrained imagination. This conjecture had begun to grow strong the day before in the midst of all his alarm and despair. Thinking it all over now, and preparing for a fresh conflict, he was suddenly aware that he was trembling, and he felt a rush of indignation at the thought that he was trembling with fear at facing that hateful Porfiry Petrovich. What he dreaded above all was meeting that man again. He hated him with an intense, unmitigated hatred and was afraid his hatred might betray him. His indignation was such that he ceased trembling at once. He made ready to go in with a cold and arrogant bearing, and vowed to himself to keep as silent as possible, to watch and listen, and for once at least to control his overstrained nerves. At that moment he was summoned to Porfiry Petrovich. he found Porfiry Petrovich alone in his study. His study was a room neither large nor small, furnished with a large writing table that stood before a sofa, upholstered in cheap material, a bureau, a bookcase in the corner, and several chairs, all government furniture of polished yellow wood. In the further wall there was a closed door. Beyond it there were no doubt other rooms. On Raskolnikov's entrance, Porfiry Petrovich had at once closed the door by which he had come in, and they remained alone. He met his visitor with an apparently genial and good-tempered air, and it was only after a few minutes that Raskolnikov saw signs of a certain awkwardness in him, as though he had been thrown out of his reckoning or caught in something very secret. "Ah, my dear fellow, here you are in our domain," began Porfiry, holding out both hands to him. "Come, sit down, old man, or perhaps you don't like to be called my dear fellow. An old man / stout court. Please don't think it too familiar." Here, on the sofa, Raskolnikov sat down, keeping his eyes fixed on him. "In our domain the apologies for familiarity, the French phrase stout court, were all characteristic signs. He held out both hands to me, but he did not give me one. He drew it back in time, struck him suspiciously. Both were watching each other, but when their eyes met, quick as lightning they looked away. I brought you this paper about the watch. Here it is. Is it all right, or shall I copy it again? What? A paper. Yes, yes, don't be uneasy, it's all right, Porfiry Petrovich said as though in haste, and after he had said it, he took the paper and looked at it. Yes, it's all right. Nothing more is needed, he declared with the same rapidity, and he laid the paper on the table. A minute later, when he was talking of something else, he took it from the table and put it on his bureau. I believe you said yesterday you would like to question me, formally, about my acquaintance with the murdered woman. Raskolnikov was beginning again. Why did I put an "I believe" passed through his mind in a flash. Why am I so uneasy at having put in that "I believe" came in a second flash? And he suddenly felt that his uneasiness at the mere contact with Porfiry, at the first words, at the first looks, had grown in an instant to monstrous proportions, and that this was fearfully dangerous. His nerves were quivering. His emotion was increasing. It's bad. It's bad. I shall say too much again. Yes, yes, yes. There's no hurry, muttered Porfiry Petrovich, moving to and fro about the table without any apparent aim, as it were making dashes towards the window, the bureau, and the table, at one moment avoiding Raskolnikov's suspicious glance, then again standing still and looking him straight in the face. His fat, wrong little figure looked very strange, like a ball rolling from one side to the other and rebounding back. We've plenty of time. Do you smoke? Of your own. Here, a cigarette, he went on, offering his visitor a cigarette. You know I am receiving you here, but my own quarters are through there. You know, my government quarters. But I'm living outside for the time. I had to have some repairs done here. It's almost finished now. Government quarters, you know, are a capital thing. What do you think? Yes, a capital thing, answered Raskolnikov, looking at him almost ironically. A capital thing, repeated Porfiry Petrovich, as though he had just thought of something quite different. Yes, a capital thing, he almost shouted at last, suddenly staring at Raskolnikov, and stopping short 2 steps from him. This stupid repetition was too incongruous in its ineptitude, this serious, brooding, and enigmatic glance he turned upon his visitor. But this stirred Raskolnikov's spleen more than ever, and he could not resist an ironical and rather incautious challenge. Tell me, please, he asked suddenly, looking almost insolently at him, taking a kind of pleasure in his own insolence. I believe it's a sort of legal rule, a sort of legal tradition for all investigating lawyers to begin their attack from afar with a trivial or at least an irrelevant subject, so as to encourage, or rather, to divert the man they are cross-examining, to disarm his caution, and then all at once, to give him an unexpected knockdown blow with some fatal question. Isn't that so? It's a sacred tradition mentioned. I fancy, in all the manuals of the art. Yes, yes. Why, do you imagine that was why I spoke about government quarters, eh? And as he said this, Porfiry Petrovich screwed up his eyes and winked. A good-humored, crafty look passed over his face. Huh! The wrinkles on his forehead were smoothed out, his eyes contracted, his features broadened, and he suddenly went off into a nervous, prolonged laugh, shaking all over and looking Raskolnikov straight in the face. The latter forced himself to laugh too, but when Porfiry, seeing that he was laughing, broke into such a guffaw that he turned almost crimson, Raskolnikov's repulsion overcame all precaution. He left off laughing, scowled, and stared with hatred at Porfiry, keeping his eyes fixed on him while his intentionally prolonged laughter lasted. There was lack of precaution on both sides, however, for Porfiry Petrovich seemed to be laughing in his visitor's face and to be very little disturbed at the annoyance with which the visitor received it. The latter fact was very significant in Raskolnikov's eyes. He saw that Porfiry Petrovich had not been embarrassed just before either, but that he, Raskolnikov, had perhaps fallen into a trap, that there must be something, some motive here unknown to him, that perhaps everything was in readiness and in another moment would break upon him. He went straight to the point at once, rose from his seat and took his cup. Porfiry Petrovich, he began resolutely, though with considerable irritation. Yesterday you expressed a desire that I should come to you for some inquiries. He laid special stress on the word inquiries. I have come, and if you have anything to ask me, ask it, and if not, allow me to withdraw. I have no time to spare. I have to be at the funeral of that man who was run over, of whom you know also, he added, feeling angry at once at having made this addition and more irritated at his anger. I am sick of it all, do you hear? And have long been. Nah, it's partly what made me ill. In short, he shouted, feeling that the phrase about his illness was still more out of place. In short, kindly examine me, or let me go, at once. And if you must examine me, do so in the proper form. I will not allow you to do so otherwise. And so meanwhile, goodbye, as we have evidently nothing to keep us now. Good heavens! What do you mean? What shall I question you about? Cackled Porfiry Petrovich with a change of tone, instantly leaving off laughing. Please don't disturb yourself. He began fidgeting from place to place and fussily making Raskolnikov sit down. There's no hurry, it's all nonsense. Oh, no, I'm very glad you've come to see me at last. I look upon you simply as a visitor. And as for my confounded laughter, please excuse it, Rodion Romanovich. Rodion Romesh, that is your name? If it's my nerve you tickled me so with your witty observation. I assure you sometimes I shake with laughter like an India rubber ball for half an hour at a time. I'm often afraid of an attack of paralysis. Do sit down. Please do, or I shall think you are hungry. Raskolnikov did not speak. He listened, watching him, still frowning angrily. He did sit down, but still held his cap. I must tell you one thing about myself. My dear old Romanovich, Porfiry Petrovich continued, moving about the room and again avoiding his visitor's eyes. You see, I'm a bachelor, a man of no consequence and not used to society. Besides, I have nothing before me. I'm running to see them. And have you noticed, Rodion Romanovich, that in our Petersburg circles, if two clever men meet who are not intimate but respect each other, like you and me, it takes them half an hour before they can find a subject for conversation. They are dumb, they sit opposite each other, and feel awkward. Everyone has subjects of conversation. Ladies, for instance. People in high society always have their subjects of conversation, c'est de rigueur. But people of the middle sort like us, thinking people that is, are always tongue-tied and awkward. What is the reason of it? Whether it is the lack of public interest, or whether it is we are so honest, we don't want to deceive one another. I don't know. What do you think? Do put down your cap. It looks as if you are just going. It makes me uncomfortable. I am so delighted. Raskolnikov put down his cap and continued listening in silence, with a serious frowning face to the vague and empty chatter of Porfiry Petrovich. Does he really want to distract my attention with his silly babble? I can't offer you coffee here, but why not spend 5 minutes with a friend? Porfiry pattered on, and you know all these official duties. Please don't mind my running up and down. Excuse it. My dear fellow, I am very much afraid of offending you, but exercise is absolutely indispensable for me. I'm always sitting and so glad to be moving about for 5 minutes. I suffer from my sedentary life. I always intend to join a gymnasium. They say that officials of all ranks, even privy councillors, may be seen skipping gaily there. There you have it. Modern science. Yes, yes. But as for my duties here, inquiries and all such formalities. You mentioned inquiries yourself just now. I assure you these interrogations are sometimes more embarrassing for the interrogator than for the interrogator. You made the observation yourself just now very aptly and wittily. Raskolnikov had made no observation of the kind one gets into a muddle, a regular modal. One keeps hopping on the same note, like a drum. There is to be a reform, and we shall be called by a different name. At least, he. And as for our legal audition, as you so bitterly called it, I thoroughly agree with you. Every prisoner on trial, even the rudest peasant, knows that they begin by disarming him with irrelevant questions, as you so happily put it, and then deal him a knockdown blow. Your felicitous comparison. He. So you really imagine that I meant by government quarters. He. You are an ironical person. Come. I won't go on. By the way, yes. One word leads to another. You spoke of formality just now, apropos of the inquiry, you know. But what's the use of formality? In many cases it's nonsense. Sometimes one has a friendly chat, and gets a good deal more out of it. One can always fall back on formality. Allow me to assure you. And after all, what does it amount to? An examining lawyer cannot be bounded by formality at every step. The work of investigation is, so to speak, a free art in its own way. He. Porfiry Petrovich took breath a moment. He had simply babbled on, uttering empty phrases, letting slip a few enigmatic words, and again reverting to incoherence. He was almost running about the room, moving his fat little legs quicker and quicker, looking at the ground with his right hand behind his back, while with his left making gesticulations that were extraordinarily incongruous with his words. Raskolnikov suddenly noticed that, as he ran about the room, he seemed twice to stop for a moment near the door, as though he were listening. Is he expecting anything? You are certainly quite right about it, Porfiry began gaily, looking with extraordinary simplicity at Raskolnikov, which startled him and instantly put him on his guard. Certainly quite right in laughing so wittily at our legal forms, he. Some of these elaborate psychological methods are exceedingly ridiculous and perhaps useless if one adheres too closely to the forms. Yes, I'm talking of forms again. Well, if I recognize, almost strictly speaking, if I suspect someone, or rather to be a criminal, in any case entrusted to me, you're reading for the law, of course, Rodion Romanovich. Yes, I was. Well, then it is a precedent for you for the future, though don't suppose I should venture to instruct you after the articles you publish about crime. No, I simply make bold to state it by way of fact. If I took this man or that for a criminal, why, I ask, should I worry him prematurely, even though I had evidence against him? In one case I may be bound, for instance, to arrest a man at once, but another may be in quite a different position, you know. So why shouldn't I let him walk about the town a bit? He. But I see you don't quite understand, so I'll give you a clearer example. If I put him in prison too soon, I may very likely give him, so to speak, moral support. You're laughing. Raskolnikov had no idea of laughing. He was sitting with compressed lips, his feverish eyes fixed on Porfiry Petrovich's. Yet that is the case, with some types especially, for men are so different. You say everything's... Well, there may be evidence. But evidence, can generally be taken two ways. I'm an examining lawyer, and a weak man, I confess it. I should like to make a proof, so to say, mathematically clear. I should like to make a chain of evidence such as twice 2 are 4. It ought to be a direct, irrefutable proof. And if I shut him up too soon, even though I might be convinced he was the man, I should very likely be depriving myself of the means of getting further evidence against him. And how? Oh, by giving him, so to speak, a definite position. I shall put him out of suspense and set his mind at rest so that he will retreat into his shell. They say that at Sevastopol, soon after Alma, the clever people were in a terrible fright that the enemy would attack openly and take Sevastopol at once. But when they saw that the enemy preferred a regular siege, they were delighted, I am told, and reassured, for the thing would drag on for 2 months at least. You're laughing. You don't believe me again. Of course, you are right too. You're right. You're right. These are special cases, I admit. But you must observe this, my dear Rodion Romanovich. The general case, the case for which all legal forms and rules are intended, for which they are calculated and laid down in books, does not exist at all, for the reason that every case, every crime, for instance, so soon as it actually occurs, at once becomes a thoroughly special case, and sometimes a case unlike any that's gone before. Very comic cases of that sort sometimes occur. If I leave one man quite alone, if I don't touch him and don't worry him, but let him know or at least suspect every moment that I know all about it and am watching him day and night, and if he is in continual suspicion and terror, he'll be bound to lose his head. He'll come of himself, or maybe do something which will make it as plain as twice. Far is delightful. It may be so with a simple peasant, but with one of our sort, an intelligent man cultivated on a certain side, it's a dead certainty. For, my dear fellow, it's a very important matter to know on what side a man is cultivated. And then there are nerves, you have overlooked them. Why, they are all sick, nervous and irritable. And then how they all suffer from spleen. I assure you, is a regular gold mine for us. And it's no anxiety to me. He's running about the town free. Let him walk about for a bit. I know well enough that I've caught him and that he won't escape me. Where could he escape to? Abroad, perhaps? Paul will escape abroad, but not here. Especially as I am watching and have taken measures. Will he escape into the depths of the country, perhaps? But, peasants live there, real rude Russian peasants. A modern cultivated man would prefer prison to living with such strangers as our peasants. But that's all nonsense and on the surface. It's not merely that he has nowhere to run to. He is psychologically unable to escape me. What an expression. Through a law of nature, he can't escape me if he had anywhere to go. Have you seen a butterfly round the candle? That's how he will keep circling and circling round me. Freedom will lose its attractions. He'll begin to brood. He'll weave a tangle round himself. He'll worry himself to death. What's more, he will provide me with a mathematical proof, if I only give him long enough interval. And he'll keep circling round me, getting nearer, and then flop. He'll fly straight into my mouth, and I will swallow him. And that will be very amusing. You don't believe me? Raskolnikov made no reply. He sat pale and motionless, still gazing with the same intensity into Porfiry's face. It's a lesson, he thought, turning cold. This is beyond the cat playing with a mouse, like yesterday. He can't be showing off his power with no motive, prompting me. He is far too clever for that. He must have another object. What is it? It's all nonsense, my friend. You're pretending to scare me. You've no proofs, and the man I saw had no real existence. You simply want to make me lose my head, to work me up beforehand and so to crush me. But you're wrong, you won't do it. But why give me such a hint? Is he reckoning on my shattered nerves? No, my friend. You are wrong. You won't do it even though you have some trap for me. Let us see what you have in store for me. And he braced himself to face a terrible and unknown ordeal. At times he longed to fall on Porfiry and strangle him. This anger was what he dreaded from the beginning. He felt that his parched lips were flecked with foam, his heart was throbbing, but he was still determined not to speak till the right moment. He realized that this was the best policy in his position, because instead of saying too much, he would be irritating his enemy by his silence and provoking him into speaking too freely. Anyhow, this was what he hoped for. No, I see you don't believe me. You think I am playing a harmless joke on you. Porfiry began again, getting more and more lively, chuckling at every instant and again pacing round the room. And to be sure you're right, God has given me a figure that can awaken none but comic ideas in other people. A buffoon. But let me tell you, and I repeat it, excuse an old man, my dear Rodion Romanovich, you are a man still young, so to say, in your first youth, and so you put intellect above everything, like all young people. Playful wit and abstract arguments fascinate you, and that's for all the world, like the old Austrian Hofkriegsrat, as far as I can judge of military matters, that is. On paper they'd beaten Napoleon and taken him prisoner, and there in their study they worked it all out in the cleverest fashion. But look you, General Mack surrendered with all his army, he. Nah, I see, Rodion Romanovich. You are laughing at a civilian like me, taking examples out of military history. But I can't help it, it's my weakness. I am fond of military science, and I'm ever so fond of reading cool military histories. I've certainly missed my proper career. I ought to have been in the army, upon my word I ought. I shouldn't have been a Napoleon, but I might have been a major he. Well, I'll tell you the whole truth, my dear fellow, about this special case I mean. Actual fact and a man's temperament, my dear sir, are weighty matters, and it's astonishing how they sometimes deceive the sharpest calculation. I listened to an old man speaking seriously. Rodion Romanovich's, as he said this Porfiry Petrovich, who was scarcely 35, actually seemed to have grown old. Even his voice changed and he seemed to shrink together. Moreover, I'm a candid man. Am I a candid man or not? What do you say? Ah, I fancy I really am. I tell you these things for nothing, and don't even expect a reward for it. He. Well, to proceed, wit in my opinion is a splendid thing. It is, so to say, an adornment of nature and a consolation of life, and what tricks it can play. So that it's sometimes hard for a poor examining lawyer to know where he is, especially when he's liable to be carried away by his own fancy too, for you know he is a man after all. But the poor fellow is seized by the criminal's temperament. Worse luck for him. But young people carried away by their own wit don't think of that when they overstep all obstacles, as you wittily and cleverly expressed it yesterday. He will lie, that is, the man who is a special case, the incognito, and he will lie well, in the cleverest fashion. You might think he would triumph and enjoy the fruits of his wit, but at the most interesting, the most flagrant moment, he will faint. Of course, there may be illness in a stuffy room as well, but anyway, he's given us the idea. He lied incomparably, but he didn't reckon on his temperament. That's what betrays him. Another time he would be carried away by his playful wit into making fun of the man who suspects him. He will turn pale as it were on purpose to mislead, but his paleness will be too natural, too much like the real thing. Again, he has given us an idea. Though his questioner may be deceived at first, he will think differently next day if he is not a fool. And of course, it is like that at every step. He puts himself forward where he is not wanted, speaks continually when he ought to keep silent, brings in all sorts of allegorical allusions. He comes and asks, why didn't you take me long ago? He, he, and that can happen, with the cleverest man, the psychologist, the literary man. The temperament reflects everything like a mirror. Gaze into it and admire what you see. But why are you so pale, Rodion Romanovich? Is the room stuffy? Shall I open the window? Oh, don't trouble, please, cried Raskolnikov, and he suddenly broke into a laugh. Please don't trouble. Porfiry stood facing him, paused a moment, and suddenly he too laughed. Raskolnikov got up from the sofa, abruptly checking his hysterical laughter. Porfiry Petrovich, he began, speaking loudly and distinctly, though his legs trembled and he could scarcely stand. I see clearly at last that you actually suspect me of murdering that old woman and her sister, Zaleta. Let me tell you for my part that I am sick of this. If you find that you have a right to prosecute me legally, to arrest me, then prosecute me. Arrest me, but I will not let myself be jeered at to my face and worried. His lips trembled, his eyes glowed with fury, and he could not restrain his voice. I won't allow it, he shouted, bringing his fist down on the table. Do you hear that, Porfiry Petrovich? I won't allow it. Good heavens! What does it mean? Cried Porfiry Petrovich, apparently quite frightened. Odion Romanovich, my dear fellow, what is the matter with you? I won't allow it, Raskolnikov shouted again. Hush, my dear man. They'll hear and come in. Just think, what could we say to them? Porfiry Petrovich whispered in horror, bringing his face close to Raskolnikov's. I won't allow it. I won't allow it, Raskolnikov repeated mechanically, but he too spoke in a sudden whisper. Porfiry turned quickly and ran to open the window. Some fresh air. And you must have some water, my dear fellow. You're ill. And he was running to the door to call for some when he found a decanter of water in the corner. Come, drink a little, he whispered, rushing up to him with the decanter. It will be sure to do you good. Porfiry Petrovich's alarm and sympathy were so natural that Raskolnikov was silent and began looking at him with wild curiosity. He did not take the water, however. Vodion Romanovich, my dear fellow, you will drive yourself out of your mind, I assure you. Age, have some water, do drink a little. He forced him to take the glass. Raskolnikov raised it mechanically to his lips, but set it on the table again with disgust. Yes, you've had a little attack. You'll bring back your illness again, my dear fellow. Porfiry Petrovich cackled with friendly sympathy, though he still looked rather disconcerted. Good heavens! You must take more care of yourself. Dmitri Prokofitch was here, came to see me yesterday. I know, I've a nasty, ironical temper, but what they made of it. Good heavens! He came yesterday after you'd been. We dined and he talked and talked away, and I could only throw up my hands in despair. Did he come from you? But do sit down, for mercy's sake. Sit down. No, not from me, but I knew he went to you, and why he went, Raskolnikov answered sharply. You knew? I knew. What of it? Why this, Rodion Romanovich, that I know more than that about you. I know about everything. I know how you went to take a flat at night, when it was dark, and how you rang the bell and asked about the blood, so that the workmen and the porter did not know what to make of it. Yes, I understand your state of mind at that time, but you'll drive yourself mad like that, upon my word. You'll lose your head. You're full of generous indignation at the wrongs you receive, first from destiny and then from the police officers, and so you rush from one thing to another to force them to speak out and make an end of it all, because you are sick of all this suspicion and foolishness. That's so, isn't it? I have guessed how you feel, haven't I? Only in that way you'll lose your head and Razumihin's too. He's too good a man for such a position, you must know that. You are ill, and he is good, and your illness is infectious for him. I'll tell you about it when you are more yourself. But do sit down for goodness sake. Please rest, you look shocking. Do sit down. Raskolnikov sat down. He no longer shivered, he was hot all over. In amazement, he listened with strained attention to Porfiry Petrovich, who still seemed frightened as he looked after him with friendly solicitude. But he did not believe a word he said, though he felt a strange inclination to believe. Porfiry's unexpected words about the flat had utterly overwhelmed him. How can it be he knows about the flat then? He thought suddenly. And he tells Ed me himself. Yes. In our legal practice there was a case almost exactly similar. A case of morbid psychology. Porfiry went on quickly. A man confessed to murder and how he kept it up. It was a regular hallucination. He brought forward facts he imposed upon everyone and why. He had been partly, but only unintentionally, the cause of a murder, and when he knew that he had given the murderers the opportunity, he sank into dejection. It got on his mind and turned his brain. He began imagining things, and he persuaded himself that he was the murderer. But at last the High Court of Appeal went into it, and the poor fellow was acquitted and put under proper care, thanks to the Court of Appeal. Thought. Why, my dear fellow, you may drive yourself into delirium if you have the impulse to work upon your nerves, to go ringing bells at night and asking about blood. I've studied all this morbid psychology in my practice. A man is sometimes tempted to jump out of a window or from a belfry, just the same with bell ringing. It's all illness, Rodion Romanovich. You have begun to neglect your illness. You should consult an experienced doctor. What's the good of that fat fellow? You are light-headed. You were delirious when you did all this. For a moment Raskolnikov felt everything going round. Is it possible, flashed through his mind, that he is still lying? He can't be. He rejected that idea, feeling to what a degree of fury it might drive him, feeling that that fury might drive him mad. I was not delirious. I knew what I was doing, he cried, straining every faculty to penetrate Porfiry's game. I was quite myself, do you hear? Yes, I hear and understand. You said yesterday you were not delirious. You are particularly emphatic about it. I understand all you can tell me. Listen, Rodion Romanovich, my dear fellow, if you were actually a criminal, or were somehow mixed up in this damnable business, would you insist that you were not delirious, but in full possession of your faculties, and so emphatically and persistently? Would it be possible? Quite impossible to my thinking. If you had anything on your conscience, you certainly ought to insist that you were delirious. That's so, isn't it? There was a note of slyness in this inquiry. Raskolnikov drew back on the sofa as Porfiry bent over him and stared in silent perplexity at him. Another thing about Razumixin you certainly ought to have said, that he came of his own accord to have concealed your part in it. But you don't conceal it. You lay stress on his coming at your instigation. Raskolnikov had not done so. A chill went down his back. You keep telling lies, he said slowly and weakly, twisting his lips into a sickly smile. You are trying again to show that you know all my game, that you know all I shall say beforehand, he said, conscious himself that he was not weighing his words as he ought. You want to frighten me, or you are simply laughing at me. He still stared at him as he said this. And again there was a light of intense hatred in his eyes. You keep lying, he said. You know perfectly well that the best policy for the criminal is to tell the truth as nearly as possible, to conceal as little as possible. I don't believe you. What a wily person you are, Porfiry tittered. There's no catching you. You've a perfect monomania. So you don't believe me? But still, you do believe me. You believe a quarter. I'll soon make you believe the whole, because I have a sincere liking for you and genuinely wish you good. Raskolnikov's lips trembled. Yes, I do, went on Porfiry, touching Raskolnikov's arm genially. You must take care of your illness. Besides, your mother and sister are here now. You must think of them. You must soothe and comfort them, and you do nothing but frighten them. What has that to do with you? How do you know it? What concern is it of yours? You are keeping watch on me and want to let me know it. Good heavens! Why, I learned it all from you yourself. You don't notice that in your excitement to tell me and others everything. From resume 2, I learned a number of interesting details yesterday. No, you interrupted me, but I must tell you that, for all your wit, your suspiciousness makes you lose the common sense view of things. To return to bell ringing, for instance, I, an examining lawyer, have betrayed a precious thing like that. A real fact, for it is a fact worth having, and you see nothing in it. Why, if I had the slightest suspicion of you, should I have acted like that? No, I should first have disarmed your suspicions and not let you see I knew of that fact. Should have diverted your attention and suddenly have dealt you a knockdown blow, your expression, saying, "And what were you doing, sir, pray at 10 or nearly 11 at the murdered woman's flat? And why did you ring the bell, and why did you ask about blood? And why did you invite the porters to go with you to the police station, to the lieutenant? That's how I ought to have acted, if I had a grain of suspicion of you. Ha! I ought to have taken your evidence in due form, searched your lodging, and perhaps have arrested you too, so I have no suspicion of you, since I have not done that. But you can't look at it normally, and you see nothing, I say again." Raskolnikov started so that Porfiry Petrovich could not fail to perceive it. "You are lying all the while," he cried. "I don't know your object, but you are lying. You did not speak like that just now, and I cannot be mistaken." "I am lying?" Porfiry repeated, apparently incensed, but preserving a good-humored and ironical face, as though he were not in the least concerned at Raskolnikov's opinion of him. "I'm lying, but how did I treat you just now, I, the examining lawyer? Prompting you and giving you every means for your defense. Illness, I said, delirium, injury, melancholy, and the police officers and all the rest of it? Ah, he. Though, indeed, all those psychological means of defense are not very reliable and cut both ways. Illness, delirium, I don't remember, that's all right. But why, my good sir, in your illness and in your delirium were you haunted by just those delusions and not by any others? There may have been others, eh? He. Raskolnikov looked haughtily and contemptuously at him. Briefly, he said loudly and imperiously, rising to his feet and in so doing, pushing Porfiry back a little. "Briefly, I want to know, do you acknowledge me perfectly free from suspicion or not? Tell me, Porfiry Petrovich, tell me once for all and make haste. What a business I am having with you!" cried Porfiry with a perfectly good-humored, sly, and composed face. "And why do you want to know? Why do you want to know so much, since they haven't begun to worry you? Why, you are like a child asking for matches. And why are you so uneasy? Why do you force yourself upon us, say?" I repeat," Raskolnikov cried furiously, "that I can't put up with it." "With what?" "Uncertainty," interrupted Porfiry. "Don't jeer at me. I won't have it. I tell you I won't have it. I can't and I won't. Do you hear? Do you hear?" he shouted, bringing his fist down on the table again. "Hush. Hush. Nuts. They'll overhear. I warn you seriously. Take care of yourself." "I am not joking," Porfiry whispered. But this time there was not the look of old womanish good nature and alarm in his face. No, he was peremptory, stern, frowning, and for once laying aside all mystification. But this was only for an instant. Raskolnikov, bewildered, suddenly fell into actual frenzy. But strange to say, He again obeyed the command to speak quietly, though he was in a perfect paroxysm of fury. "I will not allow myself to be tortured," he whispered, instantly recognizing with hatred that he could not help obeying the command, and driven to even greater fury by the thought. "Arrest me, search me, but kindly act in due form and don't play with me. Don't dare. Don't worry about the form," Porfiry interrupted with the same sly smile, as it were, gloating with enjoyment over Raskolnikov. "I invited you to see me quite in a friendly way. I don't want your friendship, and I spit on it. Do you hear? And here I take my cap and go. What will you say now if you mean to arrest me?" He took up his cap and went to the door. "Huh! And won't you see my little surprise?" chuckled Porfiry, again taking him by the arm and stopping him at the door. He seemed to become more playful and good-humored, which maddened Raskolnikov. "What surprise?" he asked, standing still and looking at Porfiry in alarm. "Ha ha! My little surprise is sitting there behind the door. He. He pointed to the locked door. I locked him in that he should not escape. What is it?" "Where?" "What?" "Aye." Raskolnikov walked to the door and would have opened it, but it was locked. "It's locked. Here is the key." And he brought a key out of his pocket. "You are lying," roared Raskolnikov without restraint. "You lie, you damned Punchinello!" And he rushed at Porfiry, who retreated to the other door, not at all alarmed. "I understand it all. You are lying and mocking so that I may betray myself to you. Why, you could not betray yourself any further, my dear Rodion Romanovitch. You are in a passion. Don't shout, I shall call the clerks. You are lying. Call the clerks. You knew I was ill and tried to walk me into a frenzy to make me betray myself. That was your object. Produce your facts. I understand it all. You've no evidence. You have only wretched rubbishly suspicions like Zametov's. You knew my character. You wanted to drive me to fury and then to knock me down with priests and deputies. Are you waiting for them? Baplon, what are you waiting for? Where are they? Produce them? Why, deputies, my good man. What things people will imagine. And to do so would not be acting in form, as you say. You don't know the business, my dear fellow. And there's no escaping form, as you see, Porfiry muttered, listening at the door through which a noise could be heard. "Ah, they're coming," cried Raskolnikov. "You've sent for them. You expected them. Well, produce them all, your deputies, your witnesses. What you like. I am ready." But at this moment a strange incident occurred, something so unexpected that neither Raskolnikov nor Porfiry Petrovich could have looked for such a conclusion to their interview. Chapter 6. When he remembered the scene afterwards, this is how Raskolnikov saw it. The noise behind the door increased, and suddenly the door was opened a little. "What is it?" cried Porfiry Petrovich, annoyed. "Why, I gave orders." For an instant there was no answer, but it was evident that there were several persons at the door, and that they were apparently pushing somebody back. "What is it?" Porfiry Petrovich repeated uneasily. "The prisoner Nikolai has been brought," someone answered. "He is not wanted." "Take him away." "Let him wait." "What's he doing here?" "How irregular!" cried Porfiry, rushing to the door. But he began the same voice and suddenly ceased. 2 seconds more was spent in actual struggle. Then someone gave a violent shove, and then a man, very pale, strode into the room. This man's appearance was at first sight very strange. He stared straight before him as though seeing nothing. There was a determined gleam in his eyes. At the same time there was a deathly pallor in his face, as though he were being led to the scaffold. His white lips were faintly twitching. He was dressed like a workman and was of medium height, very young, slim, his hair cut in round crop, with thin, spare features. The man whom he had thrust back followed him into the room and succeeded in seizing him by the shoulder. He was a warder, but Miklay pulled his arm away. Several persons crowded inquisitively into the doorway. Some of them tried to get in, only to place almost instantaneously. Quiet, it's too soon. Wait till we are sent for. Why have you brought him so soon? Porfiry Petrovich muttered, extremely annoyed, and as it were thrown out of his reckoning. Meh. But Nikolai suddenly knelt down. What's the matter? Cried Porfiry, surprised. Ha! I am guilty. Mine is this sin. I am the murderer, Nikolai articulated suddenly, rather breathless, but speaking fairly loudly. For 10 seconds there was silence, as though all had been struck dumb. Even the warder stepped back, mechanically retreated to the door, and stood immovable. What is it? Cried Porfiry Petrovich, recovering from his momentary stupefaction. I am the murderer, repeated Nikolai after a brief pause. What? You what? Whom did you kill? Porfiry Petrovich was obviously bewildered. Nikolai again was silent for a moment. Alyona Ivanovna and her sister Elizaveta Ivanovna I killed with an axe. Darkness came over me, he added suddenly, and was again silent. He still remained on his knees. Porfiry Petrovich stood for some moments as though meditating, but suddenly roused himself and waved back the uninvited spectators. They instantly vanished and closed the door. Then he looked towards Raskolnikov, who was standing in the corner, staring wildly at Nikolai, and moved towards him, but stopped short, looked from Nikolai to Raskolnikov, and then again at Nikolai, and seeming unable to restrain himself, darted at the latter. "You're in too great a hurry," he shouted at him, almost angrily. "I didn't ask you what came over you. Speak, did you kill them?" "I am the murderer." "I want to give evidence," Nikolai pronounced. "Ark." "What did you kill them with?" "An axe." "I had it ready." "Ashes in a hurry. Alone." Nikolai did not understand the question. "Did you do it alone?" "Yes, alone." "A Mitiga is not guilty and had no share in it. Don't be in a hurry about the Mitiga." Ack." "How was it you ran downstairs like that at the time? The porters met you both." "It was to put them off the scent. I ran after Mitka," Nikolai replied hurriedly, as though he had prepared the answer. "I knew it," cried Porfiry with vexation. "It's not his own tale he is telling," he muttered as though to himself, and suddenly his eyes rested on Raskolnikov again. He was apparently so taken up with Nikolai that for a moment he had forgotten Raskolnikov. He was a little taken aback. "My dear Rodion Romanovich, excuse me." He flew up to him. "This won't do. I'm afraid you must go. It's no good just staying. I will. You see, what a surprise. Goodbye." And taking him by the arm, he showed him to the door. "I suppose you didn't expect it," said Raskolnikov, who, though he had not yet fully grasped the situation, had regained his courage. "You did not expect it either, my friend. See how your hand is trembling." She, you're trembling too, Porfiry Petrovich." "Yes, I am. I didn't expect it." They were already at the door. Porfiry was impatient for Raskolnikov to be gone. "And your little surprise. Aren't you going to show it to me?" Raskolnikov said sarcastically. "Why?" His teeth are chattering as he asks, "Hee. You are an ironic good person. Come till we meet. I believe we can say goodbye." "That's in God's hands," muttered Porfiry, with an unnatural smile. As he walked through the office, Raskolnikov noticed that many people were looking at him. Among them he saw the 2 porters from the house whom he had invited that night to the police station. They stood there waiting. But he was no sooner on the stairs than he heard the voice of Porfiry Petrovich behind him. Turning round, he saw the latter running after him out of breath. One word, "Rodion Romanovich." "As to all the rest, it's in God's hands. But as a matter of form there are some questions I shall have to ask you. So we shall meet again, shan't we?" And Porfiry stood still, facing him with a smile. "Shan't we?" he added again. "Ha! He seemed to want to say something more, but could not speak out. You must forgive me, Porfiry Petrovich. For what has just passed, I lost my temper, began Raskolnikov, who had so far regained his courage that he felt irresistibly inclined to display his coolness. Don't mention it, Porfiry replied almost gleefully. I myself, too, I have a wicked temper, I admit it, but we shall meet again. If it's God's will, we may see a great deal of one another. And we'll get to know each other through and through, added Raskolnikov. Ha! Yes, know each other through and through, assented Porfiry Petrovich, and he screwed up his eyes, looking earnestly at Raskolnikov. Now we're going to a birthday party, to a funeral. Of course, the funeral. Take care of yourself, and get well. I don't know what to wish you, said Raskolnikov, who had begun to descend the stairs but looked back again. I should like to wish you success, but your office is such a comical one. Why comical? Porfiry Petrovich had turned to go, but he seemed to prick up his ears at this. Why, how you must have been torturing and harassing that poor Nikolai psychologically, after your fashion, till he confessed. You must have been at him day and night, proving to him that he was the murderer, and now that he has confessed, you begin vivisecting him again. You're lying, you say. You are not the murderer. You can't be. Oh, it's not your own tale you were telling. You must admit, it's a comical business. He. You noticed then that I said to Nikolai just now that it was not his own tale he was telling. How could I help noticing it? He. You are quick-witted. You notice everything. You've really a playful mind. Aye. And you always fasten on the comic side. He. They say that was the marked characteristic of Gogol among the writers. Yes, of Gogol. Yes, of Gogol. I shall look forward to meeting you. So shall I. Raskolnikov walked straight home. He was so muddled and bewildered that on getting home he sat for a quarter of an hour on the sofa, trying to collect his thoughts. He did not attempt to think about Nikolai. He was stupefied. He felt that his confession was something inexplicable, amazing something beyond his understanding. But Nikolai's confession was an actual fact. The consequences of this fact were clear to him at once. His falsehood could not fail to be discovered, and then they would be after him again. Till then, at least, he was free and must do something for himself, for the danger was imminent. But how imminent? His position gradually became clear to him. Remembering, sketchily, the main outlines of his recent scene with Porfiry, he could not help shuddering again with horror. Of course, he did not yet know all Porfiry's aims, he could not see into all his calculations. But he had already partly shown his hand, and no one knew better than Raskolnikov how terrible Porfiry's lead had been for him. A little more, and he might have given himself away completely, circumstantially. Knowing his nervous temperament, and from the first glance, seeing through him, Porfiry, though playing a bold game, was bound to win. There is no denying that Raskolnikov had compromised himself seriously, but no facts had come to light as yet. There was nothing positive. But was he taking a true view of the position? Wasn't he mistaken? What had Porfiry been trying to get at? Had he really some surprise prepared for him? And what was it? Had he really been expecting something at? How would they have parted if it had not been for the unexpected appearance of Nikolai? Porfiry had shown almost all his cards. Of course, he had risked something in showing them, and if he had really had anything up his sleeve, Raskolnikov reflected, he would have shown that too. What was that surprise? Was it a joke? Had it meant anything? Could it have concealed anything like a fact, a piece of positive evidence? His yesterday's visitor. What had become of him? Oh, where was he today? If Porfiry really had any evidence, it must be connected with him. He sat on the sofa with his elbows on his knees and his face hidden in his hands. He was still shivering nervously. At last he got up, took his cap, thought a minute, and went to the door. He had a sort of presentiment that for today at least he might consider himself out of danger. He had a sudden sense almost of joy. He wanted to make haste to Katerina Ivanovna's. It would be too late for the funeral, of course, but he would be in time for the memorial dinner, and there at once he would see Sonia. He stood still, thought a moment, and a suffering smile came for a moment onto his lips. Today, today, he repeated to himself. Yes, today. So it must be. But as he was about to open the door, it began opening of itself. He started and moved back. The door opened gently and slowly, and there suddenly appeared a figure. Yesterday's visitor from underground. The man stood in the doorway, looked at Raskolnikov without speaking, and took a step forward into the room. He was exactly the same as yesterday, the same figure, the same dress, but there was a great change in his face. He looked dejected and sighed deeply. If he had only put his hand up to his cheek and leaned his head on one side, he would have looked exactly like a peasant woman. What do you want? Asked Raskolnikov, numb with terror. The man was still silent, but suddenly he bowed down almost to the ground, touching it with his finger. What is it? Cried Raskolnikov. I have seemed, the man articulated softly. How? By evil thoughts. They looked at one another. I was vexed. You came, perhaps in drink, and bade the porters go to the police station and asked about the blood. I was vexed that they let you go and took you for drunken. I was so vexed that I lost my sleep. And remembering the address we came here yesterday and asked for you. Who came? Raskolnikov interrupted, instantly beginning to recollect. I did. I've loaned you. Then you come from that house. I was standing at the gate with them, don't you remember? We have carried on our trade in that house for years past. We cure and prepare hides, we take work home. Most of all, I was vexed, and the whole scene of the day before yesterday in the gateway came clearly before Raskolnikov's mind. He recollected that there had been several people there besides the porters, women among them. He remembered one voice had suggested taking him straight to the police station. He could not recall the face of the speaker, and even now he did not recognize it. But he remembered that he had turned round and made him some answer. So this was the solution of yesterday's horror. The most awful thought was that he had been actually almost lost, had almost done for himself on account of such a trivial circumstance. So this man could tell nothing except his asking about the flat and the blood stains. So Porfiry too had nothing but that delirium, no facts but this psychology which cuts both ways, nothing positive. So if no more facts come to light, and they must not, then what can they do to him? How can they convict him, even if they arrest him? And Porfiry then had only just heard about the flat and had not known about it before. Was it you who told Porfiry that I'd been there? He cried, struck by a sudden idea. What, Porfiry? The head of the detective department. Yes. The porters did not go there, but I went. Today, I got there 2 minutes before you. And I heard it all, how he worried you. Where? What? When? Why, in the next room. I was sitting there all the time. What? Why then you are the surprise. But how could it happen? Upon my word, I saw that the porters did not want to do what I said, began the man. For it's too late, said they, and maybe he'll be angry that we did not come at the time. I was vexed, and I lost my sleep, and I began making inquiries. And finding out yesterday where to go, I went today. The first time I went, he wasn't there. When I came an hour later, he couldn't see me. I went the third time, and they showed me in. I informed him of everything, just as it happened, and he began skipping about the room and punching himself on the chest. What do you scandals mean by it? If I had known about it, I should have arrested him. Then he ran out, called somebody, and began talking to him in the corner. Then he turned to me. scolding and questioning me. He scolded me a great deal, and I told him everything. And I told him that you didn't dare to say a word in answer to me yesterday and that you didn't recognize me. And he fell to running about again, and kept hitting himself on the chest and getting angry and running about. And when you were announced, he told me to go into the next room. Sit there a bit, he said. Don't move, whatever you may hear. And he set a chair there for me and locked me in. Perhaps, he said, I might call you. And when Nikolai had been brought, he led me out as soon as you were gone. I shall send for you again and question you, he said. And did he question Nikolai while you were there? He got rid of me as he did of you, before he spoke to Nikolai. The man stood still, and again suddenly bowed down, touching the ground with his finger. Forgive me for my evil thoughts and my slander. May God forgive you, answered Raskolnikov. And as he said this, the man bowed down again, but not to the ground, turned slowly, and went out of the room. It all cuts both ways. Now it all cuts both ways, repeated Raskolnikov, and he went out more confident than ever. Now we make a fight for it, he said, with a malicious smile, as he went down the stairs. His malice was aimed at himself. With shame and contempt he recollected his cowardice.